Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
The clear, starry sky was immediately covered by clouds, the patriarch's plane. But he was confidently landing through the porthole. It was raining behind the drum. From the liner to the bus, passengers ran, covered themselves with a jacket and BP squares. The station was warm and cozy. Adriana ordered at the buffet a coffee, smoky, flavorful drink, finally warmed her for the phone came running. "Hello, I'm just passing through in Street Petersburg. Remember me?" The low male voice. Yes, it greatly excited the woman. So much so that every fiber of her being trembled. "Charles, it's you." The man interrupted her impatiently. "I want to see you now. And don't say it's impossible." "I won't," Adriana replied, not hiding her joy. "Come to my place. I'll take a cab, and in about 40 minutes I'll be home. I just flew back from Antalya on vacation." "Is that what it means?" "I'm in luck. I'm on my way." And he hung up. Charles Somov. First love, the only unforgettable one. The one everyone in the group drooled over. Such a handsome gray mouse, and Adriana. He is Russian, big and light russet with clear gray eyes. She is a Tatar stubby with a short, boyish haircut, green eyes, and bright red hair. Charles was a tidbit for all the female students, looked back at him still and the center, as they said then, with unquestionable authority, a born leader, a little wordy, confident rural nugget. That he had graduated brilliantly from high school. He mastered several martial arts, so all the majors in the group respectfully greeted him, and his word was weighty. He said it like he said it. There was no one willing to argue. Why he could not breathe on the boat guessed all around the girls with lush forms a lot. And he and his father, the fugitives, were the only ones who didn't talk about their affair. Here's a mystery. Their romance was stormy, but fleeting outbreak of wild passions. Unbridled happiness lasted until one day he met her friend, big-eyed and blonde, graceful and romantic. In his third year, everyone gasped. After learning that Charles had married someone else, he began taking his girlfriend to student parties. When he saw her, he smiled and acted as if nothing had ever happened between them. Betty, on the contrary, immediately lowered her eyes and tried not to face her former friend. They had their own lives. But Charles emphasized that he was ready to communicate with Adriana on a friendly basis. Therefore, they did not lose sight of each other, and at the end of the university often called, and then moved to written messages in social networks. Throughout the years, the man kept in touch with Adriana. Communication was of an innocent nature. Not a word about former feelings and relationships. However, she always felt that Charles never forgot their hot love, and Adriana saw him a couple of years ago at a reunion. He gave the impression of a successful and quite happy man. He was an accomplished scientist. He had a PhD, worked at the most prestigious university in the capital, boasted about his family, his son's success, and the recognition of his wife's work at local exhibitions. Betty drew from childhood at the level of an amateur, but very well. So she was surprised at his desire to meet, having no idea why he wanted to meet. The cab rushed her through the night city, the lights of the houses flickering in the window, old Italian compositions blaring through the cabin. Soon she was already taking the elevator. There was the door of her apartment. Adriana entered, and the first thing she did was to kick off her cramped shoes. In a minute she stuck a chicken in the oven, her duty dish she had bought at the night supermarket near her home, and went to take a shower. By the time the chicken started to blush, Adriana showed up. With a towel on her head and a white robe opened the door. She didn't put on makeup, put on her makeup. That's the way they used to do it. They presented each other as they were. They weren't shy. Here he is her chosen one with a stylish coat, black color. Underneath is a business suit from some official event. As always, handsome and charming, in his hands a bouquet of delicate lilies. So he has not forgotten how she loves them. And the champagne Brut bottle remembers it too. He's older, he's gotten better, but he's just as charismatic and bright. Already a professor, he walked confidently into the apartment as if he was here every day. He smiled broadly, kissed Adriana on the cheek and said, "You haven't changed." And they both laughed. The awkwardness of the first few minutes had passed. Exchanging common phrases, they settled in the kitchen. Teasing the aromas behind the chicken cookies brought Adriana out of her romantic state. She turned off the oven and prepared to unnerve the table. "Let's sit here," Charles suggested. "It's cozy." They did so while the man opened the champagne. The hostess, with honed movements, spread fresh salad leaves on a plate, and in the middle placed a sealed dish evenly, covered with a golden crust on cut thin halves, rings, cucumbers, peppers, large tomatoes, and celery. They landed at the kitchen table. Charles filled a flute with champagne and disappeared. The white cap settled quickly, and the man made a toast to you and me, to those reckless and enthusiastic students from that time, from the past, to youth and the heat of relationships. Wow. The toast even made me raise my green, witchy eyes at Charles, downright nostalgic. Why would that be? What's wrong with the family at all? Charles looked away silently, nervously rubbing the napkin in his hand. "How can I tell you?" "As it is," the woman insisted. "I can't keep anything from you." The guest sighed tiredly. They were silent for a moment, and then they started on the chicken. I saw how difficult it was for Charles to start the conversation for which he had come. But the woman was patient and waited. Finally, he began. "You probably never forgave me for marrying Betty. What made you think so? And I haven't expressed any dissatisfaction to you since we broke up. Oh, come on. You've always been very reserved and not very emotional in public. The only time you ever cried was when you were alone with me." "Yeah," he lowered his head. "When we were together, you opened up to me completely, and I was delighted to dive into your joys and sorrows. Enjoyed smiling at your smiling but wonderfully open face or wiping tears from your marvelous eyes. Well, then I became a stranger to you, and you acted like a friend. That's very noble of you, but I still think it was very unpleasant in your heart. Charles, don't be absurd. I let you go where you wanted to go. You know I don't hold anyone by force. My 2 marriages and divorces are proof of that. There's pigeons walking around too. Once the ring is free, I don't dwell on it, I move on. And you've always been the center of attention. All the classmates respected you and loved you. And the girls were sick. I knew you only had to look at me with one interested glance, and all the students would jump into your arms. Adriana was content to have you all to herself. Tell me, how do you and Betty live now? We're well off. My son's all grown up, studying to be a decorator in Street Petersburg. He's all on his own. I told you about it at the meeting. But in general, our life is measured, settled, but boring. There's no sensuality in it." I interrupted him. "Is that why you came to me? To shake things up, so to speak? I'm not gonna hide the redhead you're against." He took a volley into his champagne glass and raised his eyes hopefully to the woman. Adriana took his hand in hers and felt the palm of her hand wet. Charles' embarrassment on his forehead appeared vaporized. "Are you sure about this decision of yours?" "Yes, sweetheart. I only want to be with you." And Adriana shuddered. Lightning flashed outside the window. Thunder rumbled through the sky. The rain came down with renewed vigor. She smiled and headed toward the bedroom. Charles followed her, threw off her robe, toweled off, shook out her red hair, and threw a proud look at her favorite man. Looked still slim and pretty. Charles rushed to her voluptuous embrace, hot kisses, furious moans. Crazy passions rode between them again. Tired, happy, they fell asleep at first light. In the morning, she saw Somovov on the train. He stood at the car window and sent her air kisses. Once again, he would leave her, going home to Betty, with her charming blue eyes and girl. Adriana met in the fall before she started uni. She was suffering a lot from loneliness then, renting an apartment on the outskirts of the city near a small, quiet square. Her parents brought her, and she fled back to Kazan. the city of her childhood. Adriana was very bored. She was used to living surrounded by numerous relatives and friends, noisy and breadwinning Oriental festivals. She had grown up in the private sector, which made her apartment a bit creepy. Closed space pressed on the brain-dark walls and low ceilings, so the girl tried to spend as much time as possible outside. That's when, in the courtyard surrounded by standard high-rise buildings, she watched the residents, some of them passers-by. From the sidewalks back and forth discussed political and economic topics. Some of them were walking their dogs, others were gossiping about the evil of the day. Evening darkness thickened, descending on the city. The nearby railroad station hummed with the noise of trains and the voices of dispatchers. The windows of the houses exploded with cozy light. Betty walked into the courtyard from the street, stopped outside her entryway. "Don't you know, that student doesn't rent apartments." She turned to her. The lantern light fell on the stranger's face, and Adriana could make her out. But a pure angel in a softly lilac jacket, golden curls on her tan shoulders. A smile. "It's sad and concerned. And what institution will you study at?" "In the Pedagogical University at Inyas." "Yes. And in what group?" "In 712, said the girl, "and I'm in it." Adriana got up from the bench. "What a coincidence. I'm renting from a city girl. Come on, I'll show you the apartment. It sleeps too. The landlady said she wouldn't mind if I recommended someone." "She did. That's lucky. I had an arrangement with the apartment. I was renting when I got here, but all of a sudden the woman changed her mind and told me to look for a new place, like her daughter's moving in with her." "Do you live apart from your daughter?" "Yes, she lives in the private sector on the outskirts. She only comes for money and inspections. She's a nice old woman who asks only to keep the place clean, pay on time, and not to organize noisy parties. We'll go up there and you'll see for yourself." "Where's your stuff?" "In the locker at the station." "Okay, if you stay, we'll pick them up in the morning." In the elevator, the girls went up to the 9th floor, examined the room and the kitchen. "Well, it is quite possible to live together," said the guest. "It's settled then. What's your name?" "Betty. For you?" "I'm Adriana." "Wow, what a beautiful foreign name." "No, it's a mix of Tatar and Greek. But we'll get to know each other," smiled the blonde. Even at night, they moved to the train station, which was close, creating a characteristic noise background. The clatter of train wheels, the hum of human voices, picked up their things from the luggage room and the road and back. Got close in a couple of hours. Went and drunk, told each other about their lives. They didn't even notice how the sun rose over the northern capital. Together, they were warm and happy. Since that time, the girls practically never parted. They studied and lived together. They prepared for classes, took walks, and went shopping. They were comfortable in everyday life. Adriana adored cleanliness, so cleaning was part of her duties. Betty was a great cook and loved to experiment with food. Behind her was the kitchen. And the girl also had a hobby. She loved to draw. And Fig loved to follow when inspired and lightly touched canvas or paper with her brush. Landscapes and still lifes turned out bright, positive, and slightly naive, as if children. It was not surprising. After all, the girl herself was very sincere and kind. Adriana became firmly attached to her, as she knew how to listen and sympathize with no one before. She talked a lot, told about everything, shared her innermost things, and Adriana kept these secrets. The girl was glad that she managed to meet a man who colored her urban loneliness and became a support in everything. Winter evenings dived into warm plaids. The girls sat on the couch by the TV and watched soap operas, then hotly discussed the deeds of the heroes, defending traditional human values, condemning lies, deceit, betrayal, and praising love and beauty. And one day everything changed suddenly in a couple of hours. The unity of friendly hearts began to come apart at the seams. For Adriana was noticed by the most prominent guy on the course, and she began to come to the apartment home. Not like she used to. Now her hands were clasped beautiful bouquets, and there was a glint in her eyes, a love. After a while, Adriana started talking about moving. Betty grew sad, started having conversations about how she had no more room in her friend's soul, nowhere and nowhere near her. Said she felt like a shadow that she wasn't paying attention to. "I'll go away," she said in the heat of the moment, back to where she came from. And then he introduced her to Charles, to her own misfortune. She ruined a captivating happiness with her own hands. They saw each other in the study group, of course, but only exchanged greetings. "Well, Charles, look how we live here." The girl spun around the small apartment. Betty said hello to the boy, showing her displeasure at his arrival in the kitchen. Adriana asked him, "How did you like my friend?" "She's fine, just grumpy. You know what she said about you. No offense." "Okay. She said you're too businesslike and reserved for me." "That's funny, isn't it? It's me you're reserved." "Yeah, I'm ready to love you every minute of the day." She just sees the world through rose-colored glasses. Such a romantic madam. Charles laughed. "Well, yes, she is a little." He agreed. "She's an artist. Is she a good painter, or does she paint like that?" "No, she's an amazing painter. You can show her work. Why are you so interested all of a sudden?" "I didn't realize you were a fan of the painting business. I'm just curious." "She has a boyfriend." "Why do you want to know why?" "I'm just wondering if being alone makes her angry." "She's not mean. She's a good girl. It's just that we've always been friends, and now you're here. She feels abandoned, neglected." "Well, that's ridiculous. What kind of male jealousy is that?" "Well, it happens among ladies," said Adriana, kissing her lover on the cheek. "I do not understand, and I will not argue. Apparently, the authority of the best friend is unshakable. I'll try to be nice to her. Maybe she'll let it go." He playfully slapped the girl just below her back and went into the room. Adriana, peeking in their direction from time to time, seeing Betty showing him her drawings, smiled contentedly. But it was all business. Charles, anybody would be charmed by him. Tomorrow she'll be babbling about him with admiration. "Hey, lovebirds, there's no tearing you away from each other." She was joking. "Everything's ready for tea. Come quickly." At the table, Adriana noticed that Betty's gaze had softened, and she looked at her guest with sympathy. And Charles behaved impeccably, courteous to both of them. A couple of days later, Adriana fell ill, and he rushed over to check on her. Brought her groceries from the supermarket, bought her medication. "Now you go to a party alone, and you're left without a woman's supervision," she lamented. Wraps a scarf around her throat. "Afraid for my honor." The boy grinned. "Or some hottie will catch it, and you'll be dead." "I could go," she interjected. "Betty, you both whistled before the girl, and Poppy was not to lure you to noisy corporate parties, so the equator got embarrassed." She was well pleased, he was. "You were looking out for Charles back then, and he was looking out for you." Adriana was tired of throwing herself on the pillows and soon fell asleep. "Come on, go get ready and I'll meet you there." Betty carefully prepared for the trip. She showered, styled her hair, and picked out her best dress. She put on bright makeup. She looked in the mirror and didn't recognize herself. She changed from a sweet, gentle girl into an exotic beauty. The girl did not like noisy festivals, where there was a lot of eating, drinking, singing songs, and dancing. She was not interested. And this time, at the corporate party, she was a little late. During this time, her classmates had time to take a good dose of alcohol on their chests. Young people with red faces were running around the room, organized the party by the head teacher in her apartment, all jumping, squealing in a word, fooling around like children. Charles, seeing Betty, went up to her. "How beautiful are you today?" He smiled. "Thanks for noticing." Charles shrugged his shoulders. It was hard for him to understand the girl's soul. When you meet a girl, you don't know what to expect from her in the next second. Not even from girls you don't know. "Now you've given me a clumsy compliment. I guess you're offended. Let's have a glass of champagne, if I may, right away." Charles came back a couple of minutes later. Yes, he was very handsome indeed. Stately, confident, smiling, agile. Betty was suddenly afraid that she had been thinking of him constantly, ever since his appearance at the rented apartment. She pushed those intrusive thoughts away, but in vain. Charles poured the girl more alcohol than he had deliberately poured himself. Let her relax. She drank it in one gulp. Worried at the new surroundings, she asked for more. After the second drink, the tension eased, and the girl cheered up. Charles noticed that she was very seductive. He brought more champagne and suggested that the two of them settle down on the couch. Just as all the students had gone dancing, and there was plenty of room to spare, she agreed. "What shall we drink to?" asked the guy. "And to you." Betty smiled. "Don't toast to you. You look amazing tonight." Guys, all eyes broke. "I know. Be great. You're beautiful." And now Charles blushed. The girl looked at him in a way that made the guy's blood run cold. "Yeah, best friends. It's a dangerous test of a relationship," he thought. "They have a very similar outlook on life. Your chosen one understands you as quickly as she does. Accordingly, they'll like you sooner or later. But the appearance of another body, still unrecognized. In general, the temptation is still that, whether it will be right to call her and ask her out. Is she playing with me or is she into me too? The only way to find out is to see if she is." He dialed Betty's number the next day, the day before, and entered it into his phone. "Hi," he said into the phone. "How are you?" "Great." She answered with joy in her voice. "I'm calling because I want to see you." "It's a date." The girl was confused. "Right. You want to talk about Adriana?" "No. I want to be alone with you. But we'll sit in a cafe. We'll talk. We'll drink champagne. Where's Maxim's tomorrow?" The 18 o'clock. I saw a restaurant in the semi-basement, behind the department store on the left, just around the corner. Betty arrived without being late. I think she was starting to wake up into a real woman. That's why she looked stunning in a short white dress and coffee-colored leather booties, on top of an inexpensive rabbit fur coat. But it was very much to the girl's face. "Where are the people?" she asked, looking around the empty hall. Charles got up and helped her take off her coat. That slipped from her bare shoulders' deep cleavage, touching the soft silk of her skin. It all excited the guy. "The flow of people subsides after 6, he answered in Osipov's voice. Strange usually, on the contrary, in such establishments by night more and more. "Well, what did you want to tell me?" "Have a seat." Charles filled the glasses. Betty sat down across from him. They drank afterward. They talked leisurely about the weather, their studies, and mutual acquaintances. They quickly found a rapport. "What a nice champagne." The girl admired it. Such a light and pleasant intoxication. "Betty, careful how you start, Charles. I was endlessly in love with redheads until I got close to you. Are we close?" Betty wondered. "Not as close as I'd like to be," the boy mused. "But I recognized you and disappeared. What are you going to tell her?" "I don't know, to be honest. But you agree to go out with me?" "Yeah." Betty easily betrayed her friend at that moment because she was madly in love with Charles. The same night, he took Betty to his rented apartment, and they spent the whole weekend in the heat of bedlam. It seemed to Charles then that this intimacy was unlike anything else. The desire for physical love was inexhaustible, and the girl was pure and affectionate. Even in the morning, they could not tear themselves away from each other. A beautiful spring rain caught them outside. It was welcoming and short. They laughed and kissed. From that day on, the lovers never parted for a single day. Charles and Betty were looking forward to their dates. They planned where and when they would see each other and how much time they would spend alone together. Charles was in a kind of frenzy. When he was with Adriana, he thought of Betty. When he was with her, he couldn't shake the guilt he felt for the Adriana he once loved. Betty was tormented too. It was hard for her to admit what she had done to her friend. "It's so mean," she said, lying in her lover's arms. "I'll tell her soon." "Trust me," he replied, savoring his cognac. But they couldn't give up their meetings. Neither of them wanted to cheat and betray. But still the couple did it every day. The secret meetings lasted 6 months. And then, one day, returning to the apartment, Betty found her friend in tears. "What happened?" she asked, already guessing the answer. Adriana continued quietly. The sobs made Betty uncomfortable. "That you're tearing up as if someone had died. It is that you've lost someone. Charles is cheating on me. It's like I'm dead myself. Lost in life. I've lost my meaning. And most importantly, he doesn't say who." She apologized with tears in her eyes for so long. "But I couldn't hear it. Suggested we stay friends and start a new life. My God, how shameful for a girl's soul. How impossible it is to open everything to her." PG reached out to her and became like a sister, and she pushed away her own person. Fate has sent her help in her person, probably for the first time in her life after she lost her brother. Betty went to the window and stood there, remembering the past. He had been found in the basement under the house. The 17-year-old handsome blonde boy had been there for 24 hours. The village started talking about it being a murder. But there was no hint of a crime. Betty Cathy's mother never recovered from the tragedy. As they say, she was fooled. She got involved in crime and never raised her 15-year-old daughter. Since that time, Betty was literally orphaned. Her mother came home rarely and always in dubious company. She would cast an unkind glance at her daughter and go into her bedroom with her beau. There they spent nights drinking and debauchery. Betty could not stand it and ran away to her grandmother, an old woman, her father's mother. He died young on a military exercise just after the army. Something happened in the tank, and it caught fire with the crew. Christina's grandmother was the custodian of the allowance that both children received after his death. Cathy brought in all the funds to her, and she did the saving. It was only in recent years that Cathy stopped following the former arrangement and punched everything in. The grandmother really did not want Tojic, as she called her, to be taken to the orphanage, so she helped her granddaughter in every possible way, fed her, and gave her some money. For the same reason, and did not write us to the guardianship department. Drawing became a spiritual salvation for the girl. It helped her to leave the terrible reality and immerse herself in the beautiful world of painting. Teachers at school praised her for her unusual drawings, attracted her to thematic competitions, advised her to study to become a professional artist. So she and her mother lived together and apart at the same time. However, Betty felt sorry for her mother, thinking that her son's death had broken her. But one day she had to hear such a thing. What made the hair on her head stir? That day the girl went to town to the market. Her grandmother told her to bring medicine for her. Betty visited the pharmacy and was just getting ready to go to the train station, as she saw a lanky figure, carelessly dressed in worn jeans, a jacket not the first freshness, and salty sneakers, once blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, greasy hair falling over her eyes. She recognized her mother and motioned for her to follow. Cathy stopped in the courthouse hallway, a statuesque, beautiful woman. With an abrupt motion, her mother pulled a bottle of vodka and 2 clean disposable cups from her jeans pocket and demanded, "Let's have a drink. We went to the same school. Remember me?" "We did," she nodded. But the smell of vodka made him squeamish. "Is it good that you remember?" "Sorry about the vodka. I couldn't say it dry. It's hard for me. You can't tell me what a load I've put everything under." "No, it's not mine to poke at them. It's just a kind of familiarity and reason. So I dared to pour out my torment to you at last. What's keeping me from living? I'm both ashamed and afraid." She again snatched the bottle to take a sip and straight from the neck lowered her voice and began in a flat. "Remember, the young man was murdered, and the murderer was never found. Remember?" Her interlocutor nodded. "It was me." She pounded her chest. Betty felt goosebumps creep up the back of her neck. She took a deep breath and pulled herself together. "I was holding a frying pan. When he told me that I was to blame for his father's death, that I had driven him crazy, He had gone to the unit in a bad state of mind and ruined himself and his comrades. I hit him. He fell down and stopped breathing. I found a way out, opened the cellar, and pushed him out of there. I went to the river, threw the frying pan into its dark waters, and sat there until night, weeping. It got dark. It was cold and scary. I wandered home, but there was already alive. Daughter arranged, and the police squad is standing where it was asked to confess. I cannot. Betty won't forgive me. That's how I've lived my whole life, with guilt as a grudge, in general, stated the court clerk. There's nothing you and I can do tonight. It's nighttime. We'll decide tomorrow. It's good you came to me. We'll figure it out. Let's do it by 8 o'clock. Come. I'll do it. Kathy nodded silently and walked away. Stepping heavily, her companion left the lobby and climbed the stairs to the second floor, shivering like an aspen leaf. Betty stepped out from behind a column. She never saw her mother again and lived with her grandmother Christina until she graduated from high school. No one knew about this story except her mother. Betty was convicted, and she served her sentence in prison. The girl did not decide to follow a creative path in life and decided to connect her fate with pedagogy. She knew English very well, so she chose the appropriate faculty for enrollment. Betty entered the university easily. Her grandmother Christina saw her off as she should. She only told her to get a scholarship so that she had something to live on. She gave away her savings for the first time, and then misfortune brought her to Adriana. She had never had such a faithful and understanding person by her side. Her grandmother loved her, but Betty did not tell her much. She was afraid to disturb her. 87 old ladies after all. Betty studied well. The teachers loved her. On the sidelines, they emphasized that the girl was clearly not modern compared to the permissiveness and rudeness of many students. Her image seemed very nice. She was modest and malleable, did not prove her young, far-fetched right. Discoursed and with respect for interlocutors. The girl did not belong to any group. She did not hang out, did not go to bars and disco clubs. Now she was pretty good at painting and still read a lot. Although Betty was marvelously good, wasn't she? Charles' attention. Until they got to know each other better, she hadn't attracted him. He was acquainted and not with such beauties, so it was hard to surprise a guy with her looks. But the other guys couldn't take their eyes off the girl. Above average height with high full breasts and long legs, it was impossible not to notice her. At the same time, the girl was a natural blonde with blue eyes. She was already unrivaled in her studies, and Betty did not compete with her. She was proud and admired her friend sincerely. After high school, where Adriana was considered too extravagant and independent, at university, she became a leader among other girls. The teachers prophesied a brilliant future for her. She perfectly mastered the materials from the lectures, asked questions to the teachers at home, only covered the knowledge gained. But the girl was actively engaged in self-education, went to the reading room, spent a lot of time on the internet. Time inexorably flew forward. The first and then the second session passed, successfully for both Betty and Adriana. For the summer vacation, they dreamed of going to Moscow together to see all the beauties of the capital. But Betty promised to visit her grandmother who had passed away. When she arrived in her native land, she caught her bad. The woman was lying down more and more and grew weaker by the day. Betty took her to the bathroom, fed her, and washed her. And Adriana, too, went to her own. She was born into a well-to-do family. All her childhood was spent in affluence and care from adults. The girl was a late child, and her parents strived to fulfill her every wish. At school, she studied easily and gracefully. Adriana always had a bright personality and prepared for classes creatively. This allowed her to graduate from high school with honors. It was not easy to say goodbye to her favorite teachers, friendly class, and loving parents. But the desire to live independently won out. And now she came to Kazan and perceived life in her native land in a new, almost adult way. And now she came to her favorite city on her first student vacation. At home, she was welcomed warmly and cordially with an Oriental flair. Everyday relatives came. The feasts lasted until the evening, and even into the night. And in the middle of the summer, her parents gave her the keys to a used foreign car and gave her money to learn to drive. It was a royal gift. And already in the second year, already with a friend, came to the university by car. Having met in September, they went to the park to celebrate the beginning of the new academic year. They chose a small but cozy cafe on an open terrace. The autumn sun was still giving the earth warmth and affection. The girls drank champagne and chatted, talking about the summer they had spent. It was good for them to be silent on this September evening, to enjoy a bubble of cool champagne and share their joys and hardships. And then the days flew by. Study went on as usual. Lectures, credits, sessions, perfectly mastered the material in classes, asked questions to teachers at home, only covered the knowledge gained. The girl was actively engaged in self-education, went to the reading room, spent a lot of time on the internet. This is how the first and then the second session passed, successfully for both Betty and Adriana. Soon Betty's grandmother died. She was immediately informed of this by her fellow villagers. The funeral was modest and quiet. The girl was away from her studies for a few days. Adriana supported her in every possible way, sought to entertain, cheer her up. This grief brought the girls even closer together. Betty wiped the tears from her charming blue eyes and returned to reality. And now she was the perpetrator of the grief. Her friend needs to pull herself together and tell her everything honestly. She gathered her mental strength before starting a frank conversation. "Don't cry," he did. She put her hand on the girl's shoulder. "Everything will work out." That was all Betty said. She didn't have the strength for the truth. How complicated is this? Charles was thinking. He got on the train and rushed home to his mother's house in his native village. He had to tell Adriana everything. It was a difficult conversation, emotional, tense. It left an unpleasant residue. His soul was in turmoil. He could only find rest in his small homeland in the world of his childhood. A few hours later, he jumped off the train and breathed in. "How intoxicating is the smell of wild grasses and soul hay here," he exclaimed. "What else should it smell like?" Tugged at his shirt, the old caretaker. "Nature is your destiny." "Hello, sweetheart." Charles hugged the bearded man. For as long as he could remember, that overgrown man had been on duty on the platform. Behind that spontaneous frame hair of his, he couldn't see how he'd aged over the years. "But see you later," shouted he to the old man. Between the fences, there was a path in a narrow alley that led to my home. From there, about 200 meters to the right, and a river with leaves as tall as a man on the banks. Charles wanted so badly to dive into its cool waters, to remember how as a child he used to throw full handfuls of water on his boyfriends and the neighbor girl Clara, who pretended to be angry, hiding how pleased she was with the attention of the boys and the warm splashes. The accumulated boys lay down on the beach belly down, and Slaga sent them coarse white sand. After a few minutes, they took to it in awe, and the grains of sand flowed into them as if alive. And until the very evening, when they returned from the river, they raced through the streets of the village to that very mother's signal. And the teenagers came home together in the evenings. Old apple trees, fresh bread, milk from their cow, fried potatoes and vegetables. Father slept in the field camp. Without him, they cooked simple meals, and as night descended and bright stars scattered in the sky, they sat together on the high porch and discussed the past day. Was it warm and cozy often or just one evening? Charles felt as if it had always been so, and then slept soundly until morning, closed his eyes and imagined white swans that floated on the blue river water measuredly and fabulously. And then sleep came and covered him and took him to its sweet kingdom. Remembered and the first boyish love. When he loved everything with his eyes, it was the neighbor girl Clara, who played with them in childhood, suddenly became not just a friend, but an object of exhaustion. But it was she who awakened the man in him. At school, he couldn't get close to her. He was afraid to say an extra word to her, but he wanted to see her, to know that she was near. The girl had no idea he liked her. She paid no attention to him as an object of love, but in his feelings for her it did not change anything. In kindergarten then Charles, and did not look at girls, and at times considered them nasty. But at school everything changed. And this love was already with a sensual background. She sometimes brought boys, real suffering, tormented and annoyed. It all began with the day when she was transferred to their class from the parallel class. Everyone immediately paid attention to her. They began to discuss how she spoke, how she walked, how she dressed, what kind of hairstyle she had. I couldn't say that she was very beautiful, but there was something special and sensual about her. She had long dark hair, a cute face, big blue eyes. But most importantly, she had a seductive figure. That is, she had everything that conquers men, like a real mature woman, formed high breasts, fall waist, wide hips. It immediately caught the eye and caused a lot of feelings. Yes, and the boy's hormones surging as he looked at her, had a tiring sense of hopelessness, realizing that she would never be with him. He wouldn't work up the courage to kiss her or offer her anything more. Charles called him friend and pretended not to understand his tender feelings for her. At lessons, Charles drew the chosen one. Drew as he saw in profile first on the usual theatrical sheet. One line outlined her smooth big forehead, snub nose, then plump gleeful lips. Depicted a graceful, beautiful chin, thin long neck, large ears of hair. Completed the portrait with the image of eyes, large and open the world with long and fluffy, busy upward lashes. When this artistic hobby took a lot of time, the girl noticed and a couple of times quickly looked at him, as if to say, "When will you be from me?" Fed up with your portraits, her slender little body drove Charles crazy. He watched as if mesmerized as she tumbled on the leather mast, as she did exercises on the bars, and all her movements seemed graceful and vegetable. Everything about her became admirable to the teenager because she was flexible and slender, because she had intelligent eyes, beautiful, thin arms, and a graceful back. And in math class, Charles didn't look at Charles. Otherwise, no matter what he did, the problem or the examples were all wrong. But it was a lack of attention on his part, and she noticed, and sometimes with indignation in her gaze, looked in his direction, as if to say, "What is the news? Are you asleep or what?" Where was the enthusiasm that love had passed? Had the tomatoes wilted? At one of the school nights, he silently asked her to dance, just walked up and pulled his thin, insecure hand out to her. Would she know what it cost? It suddenly seemed to him that the girl would agree to the proposal, maybe falsely embarrassed, willing, but would get up and walk with him to the center of the hall. But she didn't even move or answer him, just hummed something under her nose and turned away squeamishly, as if this invitation was something humiliating or undignified. After that, Charles ignored her for several days, but the need to see his chosen one was stronger than resentment. As time passed, he gazed at her again with his former adoration. He marveled at the way she smiled, the way she talked and laughed merrily, tilting her head back slightly. He loved it when she came in a new dress or stripes with a new hairdo or a new bow. Again, everything about her seemed perfect to him, even the curve of her arm as she pensively propped her sharp chin with her fist, even the coil of hair that nestled behind her ear, even the way she curved her lips before crying lightly if she was offended. It had gone on like that for a few years until Clara had cheated on the boy with the high schoolers. She had started to openly make fun of Charles, and her bards had ruined his tender romantic feelings. He must have fallen in love with Betty because she reminded him of his first love. The girl was airy and romantic, mysterious and exultant. If everything was just down to earth, then here emotions lifted Charles to unprecedented heights. He himself became better and kinder. Communicating with Betty, her nobility and crystalline purity captivated the boy and made his head spin. So, remembering the past and speculating about the present, he reached. To what at home? and the father and mother in the yard both splash out with their hands. Running, hugging. The pain goes away. The city with its stifling bustle recedes, and in the morning, after a long night's talk with his parents, comes to Charles. Finally realizing his feelings and solving all his problems, when he returns to Street Petersburg, he goes straight to the girl's apartment. Adriana opens the door and smiles faintly at the distance. Betty shakes her head in different directions. Their eyes are wide open in hers. Charles reads the helplessness. Didn't say, couldn't do it. And he wanted to. He takes the initiative. And Adriana, I'm sorry. He comes over and puts his arm around his beloved's shoulder. We're going to apply to the registry office. Love has Betty guiltily, lowers her head. The girl casts them a glance. She understands everything. But why didn't you say anything? How long have you had it? 6 months, Charles answers. You haven't married her yet, and you've already cheated on me. Adriana is amazed. We couldn't admit it, sighs the guy. Are you sure you're getting your life right? He says to his girlfriend. I can't live without him, cries Betty. Soon they leave the apartment, but the echo of their footsteps echoes in Adriana's head for a long time. Left alone in the apartment, the girl raises her tear-filled eyes to the ceiling. Why? Why? How quickly happiness ended. Not so long ago, Charles was crazy about her. From the first days, he had his eye on the fragile, courageous, and talented Adriana. That's why at one of the corporate parties he looked at her, but didn't approach her, just stood and watched her. Good evening. You'll spend the evening with me. Interesting offer. Alone. We'll see. I'm not like your pretty girls. I see Adriana, and that's not what I'm looking for. Let's give it a try. I've fallen in love, a girl's mind flashed. I realized it was him. My heart was beating like crazy. In the stomach for butterflies can be, she replied. The groomsman. Let's dance. Charles held himself very confidently and gallantly. He took her hand gently and led her around the room, romantic music playing. The girl trustingly laid her head on his chest. The boy's heart was beating. Very strange. Both of them felt an attraction. Adriana reached for him and Charles to her lips. He was enveloped by a voluptuous book. The girl stroked the unruly hair on the back of the guy's neck, and he became even more turned on. He touched her neck gently, correcting the orb, and she stroked her lover's face before giving him a long kiss. After the party, they took a long walk through the night city, cuddling, not shying away from the rare passers-by, admiring the reflection of the stars in the fountains. That's how 2 years ago she met her incredible love-crazy dehydration. It seemed like forever. Adriana remembered how happiness had swept over her hotly and in a wave. It was after their first intimacy. A blizzard reigned outside, and she was walking in a light mini-skirt and a short fox semi-fur coat. The strong wind was gulping, mouth choking, but literally floating above the ground. The reason was Charles. They were so suited to each other, both mentally and physically. It was as if 2 jigsaw puzzles had been put together in the marvelous figure of life. She felt so good with the one she loved. Adriana spent all her time with Charles. If she was not with him, she waited for a call from him, and she only talked about him too. Gentle, attentive. And Adriana would open up to him with all her passion. And then it all came out. Betty and Charles had been seeing each other behind her back, not for a day or two, but for 6 months. The world fell apart overnight. Adriana thought she'd been broken by fate, become ashes. Doing things on automatic. Drinking, eating, going to class. How did she survive this tragedy? How did she find the strength? How could she look at the traitors every day and behave with dignity? She endured, survived, got out of hell, became a success. She's a wealthy woman to everyone's detriment. Didn't carry a grudge against those who betrayed her. She lived life to the fullest. Raised daughters beautiful and educated. Taught them that you need to be more careful in their feelings, to be alert. Do not allow themselves to use, break, so as not to feel the pain that she experienced. She was surrounded by loving men. One must admit, willing to do anything for his wife. It was she who failed to live with them, to give them what they deserved. After all, Adriana had gotten the most out of life. There was only one thorn in her heart. Charles. There was no one but this man the woman could ever love. So as soon as he showed up on her doorstep and mentioned his desires, she immediately gave in to such intoxicating feelings. Adriana couldn't. She rushed headlong into the abyss of passion, burning both of them from the inside. Happiness was on its way. Every day was a test for the lovers. Secret meetings, deception, the ghost of past failure in love. Adriana was taut as a string. She was constantly on alert. Relationships became disturbingly destructive for her. She forgot herself, constantly thinking only of Charles. She admired him, hated him, idolized him, and feared him. The woman was ready to perform feats for his sake. But after a few minutes, the man forced to think of parting with him. And so in a circle endlessly and agonizingly went days, until he told her that he talked to his wife and left the house. And then it seemed to her that finally she had him and would never let him go. Only a few days ago, he had been fondly putting his arm around Adriana's shoulders. Charles kissed her cheek and said, "I'm not going anywhere. I'm very happy with you, and there's nothing more to discuss with Betty. It's over." I told her she was a log in the bed, slammed the door. "I'm sick of living like this. I'm a man. Go on, get undressed. I'll be right there." Charles nodded toward the bedroom. He went to the bathroom, took a shower, and before he went in, he lingered by the window to admire the sunset over Peter. Not for long. He plunged back in time, saw there the blonde, blue-eyed girl he'd met at her friend's apartment. Episodes from their lives swam before my eyes. The birth of their son, family evenings together, their favorite apartment, filled with joy and children's laughter. He was sad, but he convinced himself that he should move forward without looking back. After all, he and Betty are connected only by everyday life and his son. But this is the Borgia of feelings, a delightful intimacy, risky and daring. The woman quickly took him in a turn, gave him a sense of youth and novelty in intimate relations, and he finally gets a divorce and proposes to Adriana. She deserves it. A wonderful lover, a loyal friend, and the smartest of women. The man stretched sweetly and headed for the bedroom. After a few days, however, Charles changed his mind. He was determined to go back to Betty and beg her forgiveness and leave Adriana. He felt it was the right move to walk away from the man he loved to give him the opportunity to live life to the fullest. He saw that he was tormenting the woman. She wanted love, and all she was getting, in fact, was passion. He realized that he could not leave Betty, that he was really attached to her and felt responsible for her, and he just wanted to go home. A familiar environment where he felt comfortable. He insinuated to himself that it was honorable to leave his mistress and tell her everything as it was honestly. She could be happy without him. It was as if he was saving her by leaving. But this sensual drama lacked a final point, and the man decided to have one last date with Adriana. Charles wanted the woman to remember him strong and handsome. He bought a new shirt, shoes, and underwear, but something was missing. And Somov realized the parting gift. The man looked in the jewelry store and bought his mistress an elegant gold ring with emeralds. Charles had thought of everything. First, they would spend time in a restaurant. Then they would go to Adriana's apartment. In the morning, he would say goodbye to her. The mistress called herself. "Charles, yes," he answered. "When I see you, I miss you terribly. I'm going away for the weekend, too. Let's not at my place. We'll go to a restaurant first. I'll treat you to a nice meal. Sounds promising. Let's do it at 6 o'clock. You'd rather swim in ours than on the boardwalk." I suggested it. The woman conspicuously agreed. "I want you every minute of every day. Do you remember that?" whispered the man. "Yes, only I love you more. I love you. I love you. Don't ever forget it," she begged. "I won't, sweetheart," he coined. "I will. laughed the woman, and a red line ran through her head. I already forgot once. The man turned off. He was frustrated by the conversation. At first it had been easy and fun. He had even forgotten that they were making arrangements for the last meeting of their lives. But Adriana's words reminded him of his betrayal. After all, he had shamelessly forgotten about her when he met Betty. And yet he did not give up on his plan. On Saturday, Charles left work early, went to the store, bought champagne and cognac, bought scented candles and bath foam. A cab started the man to the restaurant. A thick twilight shrouded the city, and rare passers-by hurried home. Illuminated by the matte light of the streetlights, the wharf was empty with only one restaurant on the water. A gentle flute sounded. Charles entered holding a huge bouquet of 35 orange roses. He kissed Adriana and sat down across from her. "You are as usual," he said without delay. And his throat was dry. And so began our last date. We wouldn't see each other again after that. The lovers stayed in the restaurant for a short time, had a drink and a hearty meal. Charles handed Adriana a beautiful velvet box. From the heart, the woman opened it and gasped. What was the occasion? My God, what a lovely thing. No occasion for the most amazing, sensual, and gorgeous woman. My redhead smiled sadly at Charles. I've never felt this good with anyone. You're magical. You are perfection. Adriana looked at her lover and tears welled up in her eyes. No, she wasn't crying. The image of a strong woman wouldn't allow it. So momentary weakness, she felt desire overwhelming her. But outwardly, she did not show it. Charles understood her condition. Taking her hand, they headed for the apartment exit, one arm around Adriana's waist and the other caressing her body. He nudged the woman toward the bed. It had all happened very quickly. They loved each other so swiftly, as if someone had come around the corner and scared them away. Then they lay in the bathtub with their backs against the side of the tub, which was lined with candles. An Argentine tango poured out of the room. Tonight we're going to do something with you that we've never done before, Charles said mysteriously as he tried to do his mistress's hair out of the foam. Charles, I think we've even done things with you that other people don't know about. The woman smiled voluptuously. Adriana, believe me, there are things that you and I have never done. And others, by the way, do it regularly. He continued. That you are just a schemer. I'll do anything. Charles kissed his beloved's wet hand until I could tell the wound. He stroked her breasts. Wake, my soul. All in good time. I'm already out of it. With impatience, at least a hint. You can't. Charles climbed out of the tub, wrapped himself in a towel. I want to give you a bath. He reached for the shower gel. Vanilla for us, Adriana ordered. Great. I love it. Charles licked. He had a mistress on the soap. Trying to memorize the curves of her body with his hands, the scent of vanilla wafted through the room. Charles dragged the woman, then washed off the delicate lather with drinking sprays of water from the shower. He kissed her lips, wrapped her in a big soft towel, hugged her and held her close. What's wrong, Charles? He was worried. Nothing. I'll get the champagne out of the freezer. He went into the kitchen, took out a bottle, sat down at the table and froze. Memorize it. Every movement, every curve, every word. Soon you'll leave it all behind forever. Knocked around in the man's head. Adriana moved closer to him and put her arm around his shoulders. He poured himself a whiskey. They sat and drank in silence. Music was playing. Charles, when are we going to do something we haven't done yet? She asked. Now you just sit here. Wait a little while. I have to get ready. I don't feel comfortable anymore, Adriana admitted. Don't be afraid. It's very pleasant. You'll love it. Hurry up then. Charles took the candles from the bathroom to the room and returned to the kitchen. Let's go. The man led his mistress into the room. Let me ask you to dance. He looked into the lovingly green eyes. Are you serious? She laughed. It was the dance that brought us together when we were young. I'm inviting you. But you said we were going to do something we'd never done before in our lives, and we'd already danced. We've never danced naked before. Let's give it a try." He rolled the towel off himself and Adriana and pressed his whole body against her. The man put his arms around her waist, and she wrapped her arms around his broad, naked shoulders, and they began to move slowly to the music. How well Adriana smiled, as if these years of separation had never happened. "You are a genius." She reached for the man. Their lips joined in a sweet kiss. In the morning, Somov could not say everything he had planned to his mistress to her face. He stood and looked at her sleeping woman, smiling. Charles left a note and went to Moscow. What he read made P. Gillen shake all day. She took a bottle of champagne out of the refrigerator and drank it straight from her throat, then sat down in a chair and squeezed her eyes shut. Her eyes, tears burned her cheeks. The woman carefully, so as not to smear the carcass, wiped them with her palms. She hadn't noticed the night had fallen. Going over the details of last night in my head, and her abuser was on the train at the time. He was sure that now he finally realized what kind of woman he needed in his life. However, the meeting with his wife did not bring the expected results. He heard from her cruel words. Betrayed, trampled all your feelings, and now you're waiting for forgiveness. You're sickening to watch. After everything I've learned lately, he tried in vain to justify himself. Betty, I was an idiot. I was wrong about my feelings, but you must realize I've loved you all my life. Beds and true feelings are different things for men. Let's start over. But the wife was implacable. You led a double life, cheated, lied, dodged, and then you wanted out. How many nasty things did I hear about you? That's for my faithfulness in taking care of my son. You've got someone else, and she's my friend, albeit an ex-girlfriend. Do you really think you can take it all back? You betrayed me, you emptied your soul, and now you think it's okay to go on as if it never happened. To move on with me. I don't know how to move on, how to cope, and he wants to shake it off and come back like nothing happened. She threw her husband out and sighed with relief, looking out the window at his and Lena's silhouette. At least some finality. In a week, the woman's soul had undergone irreversible changes. Her love for Charles was gone. All these days after his departure, Betty lived alone in a spacious two-room apartment in the center of Moscow. Every day she got up with the first rays of the sun and watched the sunset over the capital, and an unbearable sadness lay on her heart. She was the only close relative, the only dear person for Charles. She had lived with him years of happiness and sorrows and joys, all in half. She loved him so much she couldn't breathe. It seemed to her that they had been through all the rough patches, but they had endured. Their marriage was strong and long. When Betty heard about the cheating and scandals in other families, he only smirked. How could such a thing be possible? It's like the stuff of fiction. We have real feelings. Charles is madly in love with me. The woman thought they complemented each other organically. They were fun and good, the two of them, joyful and cozy. She was devoted to him, caught every word, with a smile met him from work, saw him off on business trips, and was aware of all the cases. Silent, affectionate, tender. Betty, of course, felt guilty in front of Adriana. It turned out she'd beaten a man off, but she'd made her choice then. Stayed with Charles. Cut all ties with her friend. And this is a travesty. Did she deserve it? For him to hook up with Adriana too. Old love never rusts. That's what they say on that principle. She must be better in bed than me, Betty thought. But why did he love me so much and leave her? God, what a horror. Where is the truth? But like a dog in the hay. And such a man always had a family behind him. He wasn't afraid of any responsibility. And now he made such a scandal. He wanted a divorce. He said that Adriana was the bomb. And with me he was wasting time, packed all his things to her. And a week later he flew in with a gorgeous bouquet. He knelt down on his knees and apologized for what he was talking about. How could such a humiliation be forgotten? Betty was perplexed and one evening decided to divorce. After 20 years of a strong marriage, Her beloved husband Charles had left her for another woman. Betty felt as if this was not happening to her, but to the heroine of a fictional movie that ended badly. There was hope in her soul that Charles would realize the absurdity of the situation, confess his mistake, and crawl back on his knees. Only she realized that she would not accept the man back. All her feelings for him burned out. However, she wanted to hear from him words of remorse, every night out of habit. Betty beautifully covered the table, opened their favorite with her husband's champagne. But in the light of the setting sun, she sat sad and detached, deeper and deeper, alone with her memories. Maybe I have the wrong idea about love. What does it mean to love? Do we realize the importance of this deep feeling and its overriding influence on our destiny? The very concept of life is inseparable from the concept of love. It is so broad and multifaceted that even the most inquisitive minds have not yet unraveled its mystery. It has always been so, and at the same time, a man inquisitive, looking for a precise definition of what it means to love. Who is a loving person? What proofs of love exist? How do you realize that you love? To this day, in our progressive age, no one has given an unambiguous answer to these questions. At all times, a man needed constant proof that he was loved and needed someone. As a result, many things have come into existence, omen and immutable truths, the presence of which indicates that a person loves or is loved. Many of these truths have remained unchanged through the ages. Some of them are important to me. To love is to forgive. Anyone has the right to make a mistake, and no one is capable of making as many excuses for the wrongdoer as the one who loves him. This is one of the great virtues of love sees no evil. This, of course, has nothing to do with adultery. There's another thing even the church debunks on such an occasion. To still love means to stop comparing. Real feelings can only be for one person. If in a relationship one of the partners compares the other with those he had before, then the sincerity of his feelings will have to be doubted. Falling in love does not mean love. We are talking here about the feeling of falling in love, not long passionate and blind. This feeling is not true love. If the first platonic attachment passes into a serious relationship, only in this case we can talk about true love. To love is to believe. One of the most relevant truths for me, it means trust between a couple in love. The same thing that to love means to trust. Only on trust is a real strong relationship built. Faith in a partner is the linchpin that holds a family together. Cheating means he does not love. Common and most often erroneous opinion. In many families, cheating occurs not because of lack of love. More often, spouses decide to her for the sake of new sensations, for the need to be needed, and seem young. Most of those who decided to cheat claim that sex and love are different things. Characteristically, the majority are men. That's what Charles says, and I want to believe that he only loves me. And his son is his passion, but I can't take it back. Love can also be in spite of. Every man has a set of advantages and disadvantages. True love does not pay attention to the negative aspects of the partner. It is accepted to say that a person is loved not for any virtues, but in spite of his shortcomings. That is, love as he is. Such were my feelings for my husband. All loved with the vices of a strong court, successful or wrong. For each person with his or her particular view of the world has his or her own ideas of what it means to love truly. Somewhere I read that an American scientist had compiled a list of a few steps that he believed should lead to true love in a relationship. Betty pulled a notebook of notes from the kitchen cabinet and read them out. The goal of any relationship is to smooth out and heal all childhood heart itches and heal resentments. In a relationship, there should be no illusions. A person should be perceived as he is without expectations. Relationships should be worked on every day in any situation. With a man, it is important to realize that his needs are as important as yours. You should not forget to tell your partner about your own desires. Before projecting your feelings and thoughts onto a person, it is important to understand yourself and try to shield your lover from your shortcomings. In any relationship, it is worth remembering that love is a voluntary sacrifice. Everyone decides for what he brings it, and whether the person who is near the time and effort that goes into the revival of true feelings. The woman read the last lines with tears, and then in her heart she threw the notebook into the trash. Nonsense. All my noble thoughts helped when everything was generally good. It was only the small troubles that disturbed our world. And now she waved her hand tiredly. For a quarter of a century, she and Charles had lived together, fought rarely, reconciled quickly. The son was already a man with a life of his own. As the boy grew up, he knew it was Daddy who was in charge. His decisions were never questioned. In many ways, it was Betty's merit, because she respected her husband immensely. Charles really wasn't afraid to take responsibility. He was always proactive about household and financial matters. She was with him like a stone wall, and just a week ago it seemed to the woman that their life was unbreakable. Everything went on as usual. Charles was actively involved in the upbringing of his son, and Charles did not dote on him. From diapers, as they say, in his teeth, he always found time for his family. When they were young, they often went camping, and then bought a cozy dacha and well arranged it for recreation. Charles always spent his rare weekends with his family, and it seemed that it would last forever. Even when the son flew out of the family nest, the spouses on weekends went to the theater movies, visited the tennis court, and suddenly at dinner, simple and routine, the husband announces that he has fallen in love with another woman and intends to divorce. Betty flares up. A scandal ensues. In the heat of anger, the husband tells her that she's not interesting in bed. Then why did he live all these years? Why? He left her if she was so hot, didn't he? Just spit on her as if life hadn't tied them up in one tight knot. Betty went into shock. Her world just shattered into 1,000 pieces. She didn't even cry at the news, but her soul cried out. Why? How could he? She had always loved and cared for Charles, and even though she was reserved in her feelings, but tried to support her husband in any endeavor with understanding of his wishes. Since they were young, they were not only lovers, but also the best of friends, and it had never occurred to her that her husband might be attracted to another woman. So much for spitting on the physical side of his relationship with her. She thought he was a very intelligent man, saw his reverent feelings for his family. Betty claimed her husband's eternal fidelity. It seemed to her that they were mentally inseparable. After he did such a thing, she packed up his remaining belongings and left them at the door. He was barred from entering her world. Betty didn't intend to bathe in such lies anymore. Of course, the years had taken their toll, and her relationship with her husband was no longer as passionate as it had been. But Betty felt a tender affection for him. She wanted to take care of him, to protect him from negative information. It seemed that he was happy with their marriage too. He always said that the house was his rear, because not everyday life, not time did not overshadow in her mind the impressions of that significant meeting in their fate. She clearly remembered the details of their acquaintance, and also the bright moments of their wedding, the birth of their son, their vacation at the sea. For so many years, Betty had faithfully loved a handsome young man who before her eyes had turned into a great scientist and attentive father of a family. Her career also did not stand still from an ordinary teacher to the dean of the university. Yes, and passion made the woman popular in narrow circles. She exhibited her portraits and landscapes in local art galleries. Her son grew up in love, affection. Parental attitude to him was very careful. Even as young adults, Charles and Betty dreamed of having many children. But other pregnancies were unsuccessful, so they gave Charles all their love without a trace. Together, they decided that they would raise their child in a healthy environment. So they resolved all their conflicts behind closed doors, always on his side. As if Spartans protected the boy from all the hardships of life, Alexei grew up calm, respectful, and talented. He inherited his mother's abilities and studied architecture in St. Petersburg. Betty and Charles often met with their son, came to the city on the Neva. But the last time he traveled alone. And as it turned out, he wasn't visiting his son, but his former love. This prank, now, looking into the past, The woman realized that her feelings for Charles had changed over the years. Falling in love had grown into true love. She had become willing to make sacrifices for the sake of their relationship. She understood her husband, his feelings for Adriana. She knew she was a brilliant man, but for him to drop everything and walk away, Betty couldn't have imagined in her wildest dreams. Losing her husband was terrifying. Though disappointment and resentment choked her, her feelings for him were fading. The situation depressed the woman. 2 decades flashed before Betty's eyes in a few minutes. She woke up from her thoughts and walked over to the mirror. From there, a tall, statuesque woman with a well-groomed face and hair looked back at her. She always looked after herself, looked good, and Charles appreciated it. He often complimented her on her visits to swimming pools, sports and gyms, beauty salons. But apparently, beauty isn't enough. Need hot intimacy, sighed Betty, and her words echoed through the empty apartment. After all, he never came to repent again. Yes, that's right. And I don't need to. But I wish time would stop and turn back. And he was still my faithful husband. A week ago, everything was just perfect until that ill-fated day when the rose-colored glasses fell from her eyes. The woman walked to the marital bedroom and opened the closet. In front of her hung a gorgeous evening dress, a slip, dusty rose colored with open shoulders, and a cleavage area. Betty had gained weight after giving birth, but the outline of her figure had been preserved. Of course, not 42nd, but already 50th size. But thanks to gym classes, the woman's figure was taut. In this dress, she wanted to shine on their 2-year wedding anniversary. Her husband appreciated it then, still in that family's happy life. She poured herself her morning coffee. Vasca was a typically striped cat. The mongrel was getting lost, and her feet an honorable grunt. Betty lifted her cup with pleasure, inhaling the aroma of the budding bottom. Down the hallway of their large 3-room apartment, which they had put all their finances and soul into renovating, footsteps were heard. The nature of this chica beggar's footsteps she would recognize from a 1000. Charles peeked through the open kitchen door. "Betty, what's that bag in the hallway?" "Don't touch it. It's my dress. I bought it yesterday for our anniversary." "Which one is it? You must have made a lot of money. Traveling around on business for your wedding day." "Bought a woman's mock wedding day." "Oh yeah." Charles had a confused look on his face and grabbed his head. "I forgot. I completely forgot. We should hang it in the closet." Betty thought and carried the bag into the bedroom. She carefully laid out the dress on the carelessly matrimonial bed. Charles came in next. "It's very pretty. You'll be irresistible in it. The one I first went to your place in was better. Give up that simple student one. This one's expensive. You've only gotten better over the years." He put his arm around his wife and held her close. For a day, his Betty broke into a dress, and they romped around the room in a silent dance. The Queen whispered to Charles and plopped her on the bed. "Good thing it's a day off," he summarized, covering his spouse's mouth with a kiss. Betty. It was scary to realize that the magic was over, and now she had to file for divorce. Charles kept calling her again and again, asking for forgiveness, but she remained adamant. During the process, the woman met James, the practicing attorney. He was marvelous. Sturdy, stocky, a slouch in the shoulders, prone to obesity, dark blonde with sly gray-blue eyes and a round dimple and on the left chin. He dressed stylishly and very expensively and used designer perfume. When he approached Betty, she melted and became extremely sensual. The Greek god. The woman defined him for herself. She did not know why, but having lost all shame, her mother wrote her phone number on a piece of paper and slipped it into his hand during another consultation. And this god called her. The affair was lightning fast. James captivated her not only with his passion, but also with his intellect. He told her a lot about his work, took her to theaters and concerts. The man unexpectedly fell hard in love with Betty, although he honestly admitted that at the beginning of their relationship he thought it was an easy infatuation. He often came to Betty's house for the night with gifts and flowers. Her love for him was not as intense as Charles. In his relationship with his ex-husband, the central figure was himself, with Betty in a secondary role. The relationship with James was very different. She was on a pedestal. The man adored her, literally idolized her. For him, as they say, on it came to a wedge of white light. He didn't torment her nagging demands for all-consuming attention like a husband. He just loved her wholeheartedly. Betty had confidence in him. She didn't have to prove her love every day. On the contrary, he himself never tired of taking care of his chosen one, striving to fulfill her every wish. In this love was the main thing that guarantees the longevity of the relationship: mutual respect, attention to details, responsibility, reliability, and physical attraction. James was made for family life. He did not like nightclubs, noisy companies, drank only on holidays and then a little. He loved home. For a long time, being a bachelor, the man himself could wash and clean. His apartment was always clean. He loved and knew how to cook. That's why he divided household chores into female and male, artless, honest, and decent. At times, Betty could not believe her happiness. One day, they lay in bed tired of love and were silent. And suddenly, James burst into tears. "Betty, marry me. Enough with the mistresses. It's time to start a family." He looked at her sternly. "Well, what are you going to do?" James silenced the woman. "You know that I'm not divorced yet." Not surprised by the question, she replied. "It's a matter of days. It's time for us to build our own happiness. Do you understand me?" "Of course I understand. Don't think I'm so dapper. Don't think I'm a walker. I just haven't met the right woman. Everything was wrong before you, and you came in. And I, as a boy, all fluttered like lightning. And then I got to know you as a person. And I realized that you're my only one. You're my dock, my home, and my destiny. I won't leave you and I won't cheat on you. I've found my harbor. No more traveling. Betty, not Tommy, but would you refuse such a prominent and wealthy guy? Your eloquence is unrivaled." Betty replied with a chuckle. "That's a speech worthy of a man in love. I'd like some champagne, flowers, and a ring to go with it, and a smack on the lips for James. I'll have my sunshine right now." Betty got out of bed and went to take a shower. Now was the word, not a sparrow out. An hour later, the couple entered a small bonfire that moved along the Neva River, enjoying the exquisite views of the ancient town. They drank French champagne and whispered sweetly. Then they returned to the shore and ducked into the first jewelry store they came across. Betty picked out a gorgeous diamond ring. James didn't trifle and asked the salesman to pick out earrings. Betty put them on immediately after paying for them. She was happy and satisfied. She took James under her arm, and together they went outside. There was a fresh, cool breeze. The sun was shining. "But now I must respond to your proposal." The woman turned to James. "But one thing bothers me. Charles is still walking around, standing under the windows at night, begging for forgiveness." Betty sternly wagged his finger at her. "Maslikov does not fall into the dope. You're already with me. We have a sense of mutual understanding. In fact, with the naked eye you can see that we are made for each other. And this is pity. Well, spoil your life. First of all, yourself. And me, of course, into a bleak, unappetizing grayness. Oh, that's just me. Charles is as useless now as a suitcase without a handle. No, it's too late. It's all trampled on. I'm beginning to wonder if there was love there, to seduce my friend. It's like a sporting interest for me. We've grown apart through him. I blame Adriana." "Come on." 3 tearful, conscience still hurt, and asking for forgiveness. "Do you think she needs it? You need it, sweetie. First of all, you need it. But enough about them. What are you gonna tell me?" "I'll give you a ring, and a romantic proposal, and I'll get you a bouquet." He nodded toward the flower stand. They accepted the fact that they were lucky. They had known the kind of love that books are written about, music is composed, paintings are painted, and they decided that their bodies and souls were worthy of enjoying that fairy tale every day. That's how I answer you, isn't it? I don't want to fall behind my favorite eloquence. I'm not one to mince words either, am I? That's it, Betty, you're mine, James said enthusiastically. He took her in his arms and carried her to pick flowers. The woman laughed. The wind caressed her face. How far away now was the suffering of her spouse and that life. But in Gillen, it had been very bad for a long time. Once again betrayal. Charles, like a red line in her life. God, how she had loved him, how selflessly she had given herself to him, forgetting that he was someone else's husband. The woman realized from herself that she also wanted to take revenge on her ex-girlfriend. The boomerang returned to you, but satisfaction did not come. The soul was frantically thrashing, taking a vacation at the travel agency at her own expense. She went to Kazan to lick her wounds. She told her parents nothing. And why disturb a dignified old age? And they had no sins. They didn't know any. The plane began to descend. This time Kazan met Gillen with warm weather. She drove up to the house of her youth and immediately looked into the outermost windows of the third floor. She quickly climbed the stairs and decisively pressed the bell button. The front door bolted on the threshold. Her mother appeared. Her lips quivered, and she did the same. She stepped towards her and pressed herself against her daughter's chest. Mom better smile. Native woman put her arms around her shoulders and kissed her gray temple. Marcel, why are you lying down? Meet your daughter. She took her hand and pulled her into the apartment. Her father appeared in the hallway with a shining face. He's choppy. He hugged her. What brings you to our neighborhood? Passing through, he asked. She waved her head in the negative. No, I just missed you. Cindy offered her hair with trembling hands. I'd cook something delicious. Well, cook something now. Marcel cast an angry look at his wife. And you, daughter, why don't you take a rest from the road? He waved to his wife, and they went into the kitchen. Adriana took off her coat and boots and went into her room. Nothing had changed there. As before, on the bunk shelves stood favorite books. On the sofa lay an old plush plate. She lay down and fell asleep instantly. She dreamed of dark, raging waters. A strong wind was driving a boat through the water. With it she was alone in the vast sea. An oncoming vessel emerged from the fog. A woman stood in the stern, her hands drawn to her. A dirty lilac damp haze shrouded her silhouette, and it dissolved into space. And yet Adriana realized it was Betty, that she wanted her husband back. But he'd already chosen family and said so explicitly, still in the power of sleep, and Adriana opened her eyes and pulled in her nose. The wonderful aroma of roasting meat brought her back to reality. She slipped her feet into her fluffy house slippers and walked out of the bedroom. Mom was fussing in the kitchen. On the table was a plate of colored plentiful. What a regal breakfast awaited me. And Adriana said sweetly, pulling up Sonia's lunch. Cindy switched to a whisper and hurry up and come on. Because my father has been eyeing the brandy since yesterday. She nodded toward the final. But it's fixable. The woman went into the bathroom. Half an hour later, the whole family gathered at the table. After 3 drinks, the host asked his daughter, I hope you're joining us for a long time. A week at your complete disposal, answered her. Spread with beer, puffed mashed potatoes, and with a salad of fresh vegetables. Very tasty. A wide smile spreads across Cindy's face. What are your plans for today? What plans? I have some suggestions. I agreed to everything in advance. Adriana spent the whole day by her parents' side. They drove to the cemetery in quiet sadness, stood by the dear graves, stopped by the small chapel nearby in the church candle building. Adriana remembered her grandparents, their affectionate looks, and pie-smelling home. Then the Porokov family wandered around the evening city for a long time, admiring the places dear to their hearts. They had dinner in a small cafe and returned home. Listen, Adriana, We decided to renovate your bedroom so that the granddaughters would feel comfortable when they came to visit. Take the table apart, please, her mother asked. Adriana smiled and nodded, and that evening she cleaned it up, and at the same time she went back to her childhood. Almost the entire contents of the desk consisted of school books in the bottom drawer, notebooks with notes in a neat stack. Something suddenly prickled in her chest as she moved toward them. Here was a picture of her and her high school admirer looking into the lens together, smiling ear to ear. Michael Saylors is an interesting, quiet boy. Loyal never took a step away from her, not handsome, but charming. Why did I reject him then? Here we all look for something in the distance, and next to the good we do not notice. She pondered. Having finished cleaning, Adriana took a bubble bath. She listened to her red hair, put on warm pajamas, and dove into bed. For a long time she couldn't sleep, remembering the moments of lovemaking with Charles. So she got up and went to the kitchen. I poured myself a rum and began to look through the notebook I'd found. Having stumbled upon the number of the school beau, she squinted slyly. Here I'll take and grabbed fate by the tail. I'll call. What if he's not married? He still remembers me. And so I did. I recognized Michael's voice at once. But just in case I asked, hello, hello. Can Michael hear Adriana? The man gasped with delight. He was genuinely happy about the call. Are you here in Kazan? I'm at home. How are you doing? But what's going to happen to me? How are you? I'm fine with my job. Prestigious, well paid. I've been married twice. I had twin daughters from my first marriage. The older ones are already students. They live in the capital. And you? I work too. The woman felt Michael smiling at the car service. But you have a great hand from your youth, and a head. I had to become. I'm the general manager there. The man laughed. That's how it is. I'm really glad. It's really great. Adriana held her breath. Do you have a family? I don't have one. I lived with one, but they split up. I'll see you around. Okay. Do you want me to come over there now? A man came out of nowhere. No, I'm busy right now, and I'm going to bed. And Adriana didn't expect Michael to be so forward. Too bad, he was upset. Then we'll call tomorrow. Okay. She crawled under the covers and started to remember her meetings with Michael and their high school conversations, and fell asleep in the past. He stayed up all night thinking about Adriana, about how she was now, how their first date would be in so many years. The man still couldn't believe she'd called him. In all these years, he hadn't forgotten about her. The world had turned upside down for Mistress. He suddenly felt happy. And his heart beat more often with the right to realize his dreams. Everything became different, filled with meaning. The next morning, he called her himself. The weather forecasters are predicting a downpour by tonight, and the sky is frowning. Come visit me. I'll cook your favorite potatoes under a fur coat. We'll see. Michael suggested comedy. Wow, what details does he remember? Comedy flashed through the woman's mind. Yeah, it's like a tragedy, and I'm done. That was the end of it. Adriana was so nervous before the meeting that she almost got a migraine. So she took some pills and calmed down a bit. At the door to his apartment, she crossed herself for some reason. She took a deep breath and rang the bell. Hi, a man with a short haircut shone through. Michael was wearing a white t-shirt and expensive jeans. He looked great, very youthful and modern. Hi, come in, come in. The man was confused. Let me look at you. You're adorable, Adriana. You used to be a super girl, and now you're gorgeous. The woman is embarrassed. Have you changed for the better? Does it suit you? Well, I'm a businessman now. Mistress laughed. The position obliges. Let me give you a hug. Yes, please. Adriana, spreading her arms wide, Michael squeezed her in his strong arms, gently stroked her back, and did not want to let go. Let's eat. I've made it. We'll make it. Adriana slipped out of Michael's arms and sat down at the table. It was obvious that the man had tried very hard. He bought good champagne, cut up a salad of fresh vegetables. He polished the glass and the cutlery. "Shall we turn off the lights? Long live the candles," he asked fondly, looking at his guest. "That'll do, Zelive," she laughed. Adriana ate with appetite and generally enjoyed the romantic atmosphere. She tried to remember how long ago something similar had happened in her life. A date as nice as this one had failed. No one had ever given her such shared moments and genuine interest in her as a person and a human being. Dinner didn't last long. No one really wanted to eat. They talked more and more, trying to make up for the deficit that had lasted 10 years. She talked more, of course. And Michael listened, reacted emotionally, cheered up in some places, clenched his fists in others. Both felt some non-existent guilt for the loss of those youthful, pure relationships, so they drank champagne greedily to drown it out. So they quickly downed a bottle each. The air was full of reticence, the desire to express their feelings and fear of embarrassment. Suddenly, they would misunderstand the thundering outside the window, the drums, the rain, the sky bursting with bright lightning. Holding hands, Adriana and Michael stepped out onto the loggia. Formidable winds drove black clouds across the sky. In the blink of an eye, the two men were face to face. Michael looked into Adriana's green cat eyes and took in her mouth for a long moment. "I missed you," he said, pulling away from his guest's lips. "You are my knight," she replied in a whisper. They returned to the apartment and went into the bedroom. Their closeness was like the beauty of lilies, purely sincere, delicate. The rolls of thunder grew quieter and quieter. The rain was going away. It washed the city, and by morning it appeared before the regal sun in all its beauty and spring freshness. Michael kissed the woman's neck and whispered, "Sweet girl, how many years have we lost, my fiery fox? We'll make up for it, Michael. Let's catch up, for today the most important thing happened. Fate brought us together and showed us what true love is." Betty married Masliakov and was quite happy. Only one thing troubled her soul, the wound she had once inflicted on Adriana. She gathered her courage and called her. Soon the woman came to Moscow to visit her daughters, and they met in a cozy little cafe on Arbat. The friends sat down opposite each other. "Do you know that Charles has become a chronic alcoholic?" No, she was confused. That's how he began to take it on his chest after the divorce. He swore he loved me very much. But how could he? I didn't notice. I'm Adriana. I couldn't believe what her ex-girlfriend was telling her was real and not a bad dream. Alcoholics are very resourceful, and secrecy is very difficult. Sometimes it's hard to realize a person's missing. I'm telling you that honestly. Let's help him get better. Let's find the best doctors for rehabilitation," exclaimed the woman, desperate. She tried to find a way out of the situation, feeling sorry for Charles. My son and I put him in hospitals many times. He'd hold out for a month or two, and then go on a longer bender. Adriana listened silently. She couldn't believe her ears. "I didn't know anything about it." "Did you know about him being kicked out of the institute? It was useless to do business with him." "I swear I knew nothing." "I'm sorry. I realize I betrayed you and our friendship." With a pleading look in my eyes, I asked Betty, "My darling, I don't hold a grudge. It was what it was. If you need support, call me anytime." Adriana said clearly, "I don't need anything. I found my happiness and you. Oh, I can brag too. That's the kind of man. He's done the impossible. I've forgotten Charles. I'm living my life fully, joyfully, and without heartache. And for the first time, I feel like a weak woman. It feels so good. You know, I realized that if a woman in the family emancipation, it is true, and the pragmatism of life is that the man allows it to her and not after many years of marriage, and the initial beginnings of the relationship, he benefits from it. Maybe doesn't want to earn more or solve family problems. Wildly afraid of responsibility. He lives a normal life. And suddenly, after 20 years of marriage, the wife is not tender, not caring, not sexy. That's not how it works, bras. Or rather, it happens only in a man's mind. And she didn't possess any femininity from the beginning. Did you give her those qualities yourself, while you were physically attracted to her? How else do you explain that it's all gone? She's changed in a weird way. It's creepy. So who's to blame if they're the ones chasing looks, or the sensual pleasures of it, and they were fooled by them? And then, when brutality went down, tenderness, care and respect were needed and gained value, or bright impressions wanted on the side. True, and a hierarchy of relationships in nature, in that parents lay the personality of their children, and the man makes the woman, in the sense that gives her to open up, if it allows her to be around her weak emancipate in women. The paradox of male failure. This is the male fallacy in that for them, after 40, their priorities change. For them, not for their women. She is the same as she was in the early days of acquaintance, and the basis of cheating and general weakness, cowardice, and insecurity. Not enough strength and intelligence to refresh feelings in the family. On strong relationships need to work. Nature is such that a man always leads a relationship, even the weakest one. So no matter how much they cheat, what you sow is what you reap. That's what you said about Charles and me. That's what I said about me too. But now I'm with a real man. Can you imagine? I'm 50, and he calls me a girl and protects me so much. Sometimes it's scary that I could have missed out on such happiness in my life. Oh my God, I'm so glad that he said. So, hold your peace. 5. She gave her hand to her friend. She clapped her hand. Of course, peace, and no more black cats will come between us.
Subscribe and click the bell.
God, where is she? Why isn't she answering? Samuel couldn't find a place to go, waiting for his wife to call. What's going on over there? They know I'm worried. Suddenly the phone came to life, and the man grabbed the receiver. Samuel! He heard his wife's voice. Don't worry, please. Susan? The angry husband ranted. Where the hell have you been? Why aren't you answering your phone? I don't know where to go or what to do. Samuel, congratulations. We have a baby girl. What? I don't understand. The husband is dumbfounded. What girl? A daughter. Susan laughed happily. We had a daughter. Wait, but it's a month away, isn't it? It just happened. I guess I got banged up on the road and went into premature labor. That's why I couldn't call you. Don't worry, she's fine. She was born healthy and beautiful. What do you mean? Don't worry? My husband was furious. I persuaded you not to go to your mother. No, you carried 300 kilometers away, and without me. I knew that this whole thing would not end well. But I had to visit my mom. My wife justified herself. It's not such a long distance. It all worked out. The doctors and nurses here are marvelous. They treat me like a piece of paper. What are you talking about? There's a private clinic waiting for you here. We picked it out together. I paid for it a long time ago. It's no big deal. You'll get your money back. Believe me, it's no worse than the one in town. So tell me where this hospital is right now. I'm on my way right now. I won't leave you for a minute. You must see good doctors. Susan dictated the address to Samuel. Holy Mother! He cursed when he saw that the hospital was located in some godforsaken district center. Where the hell did you go? Okay, wait. I'm on my way. Susan stood at the window, watching the snow fall outside. Her newborn daughter was sleeping peacefully beside her. Susan, how are you feeling? A nurse came into the room. I'm fine. The woman smiled gratefully. My daughter is sleeping. My husband should come to pick us up soon. He was upset that I gave birth early. Lucky you and your husband. The nurse sighed. He's caring. Yes, We have been waiting 10 years for this child. We have been everywhere, checked everything. The tests were great, but we couldn't get pregnant. Do you know how painful it was to look at the moms who refused to give up their babies? We are young, healthy, cannot give birth to a baby, and these woeful moms, God gave such happiness, and they refuse it. And now the woman came to the crib and looked affectionately at the girl. We are happy to, the three of us. It's a shame about the refuseniks, the nurse said. I have so much milk. Susan laughed suddenly. There's enough for two. To tell you the truth, I've always dreamed of having twins so we could have 2 kids at once. The joy of all the years of waiting. Susan? The woman asked, hesitating. There's a little boy in the room, a sweet boy. His mother died in childbirth, and we haven't even seen his father. If you have a lot of milk, maybe you would agree to feed him. I have to pump anyway. Oh, and of course, bring him quickly. The young mother agreed. But he must have grandparents, right? They should, but Lisa, the boy's mother's name, said no one wanted her and her son. That's terrible. Poor thing. Tears came to Susan's eyes. Don't worry, you'll lose your milk. The nurse was scared. I feel fine. Bring the boy in. 5 minutes later, the woman returned with the baby in her arms, sucking greedily on the breast, looking at Susan with blue eyes. Little one. The woman said quietly and stroked the baby's head, kissed the pink cheek. Only 2 days of his life, and already he has experienced grief and betrayal, and now he is going to the orphanage. While we will stay with us, and then to the baby house, maybe someone will be lucky enough to adopt him. The boy is healthy, and his mom is not some alcoholic. Her kidneys failed, and here we do not have such equipment as in the city, so they did not save. She sighed sorrowfully. There was a noise in the corridor. What's going on in there? The nurse left Susan and walked out of the room. A man? She heard a woman. Where are you going? You can't go in the room. There are children in there. Let me through. The door opened and Samuel appeared on the threshold. My wife is here. Susan put her finger to her lips, still cradling the boy, who, because of the sudden sounds, let out his chest and was about to cry, wrinkling his nose funny. She pointed to the crib where their daughter was sleeping peacefully and continued feeding the baby. Susan? A nurse came into the room. Give me the boy. Daddy, you won't be here long, no visitors allowed. They're discounting the fact that you've traveled a long way. I got it. Thank you. The nurse took the baby away. Susan. Samuel handed his wife a bouquet of flowers, kissed her, and then asked her sternly, What was that just now? Samuel, Susan whispered hotly. Let's take this boy, shall we? Are you crazy? The man marveled. Are you out of your mind? How could we take someone else's baby? My love, his mother died, and his relatives have written a refusal. Nobody wants him, you understand. We'll have a girl and a boy. That's great. Do you realize you're taking someone else's baby into the house? Samuel was really pissed off. What if it's sick or we can't handle it? Are you going to take it back? It's not like picking up a kitten on the street. It's a person. I get it. Susan looked at her husband pleadingly. We can handle it. His mom was a decent woman, not a drunk, not a drug addict. Okay. Samuel paced the room from corner to corner. I don't want to hear anything about him right now, you understand? I'm tired from the road. You're emotionally asking me to take in an orphan. Let's do it like this. The doctor said you're gonna have to stay here for a couple more days. We'll think it over with a cool head, and then we'll decide. Okay. Susan replied, looking at her husband with a rapturous gaze. "I love you, and I love you." The man leaned over and kissed his wife, then walked over to the crib where their daughter was sleeping peacefully. "Thank you for the baby." He leaned over the girl, scrutinizing her face. "How long we've waited for this day." "Yes, I'm very happy. We are both happy, and now I have to go." Samuel said regretfully, "Your nurse is very strict. I'm afraid she'll kick me out. I'd better go myself." He smiled, went to his wife again, hugged her and kissed her. "Don't miss me. I'll come back tomorrow." Her husband left, and Susan did not sleep. She thought whether it was right to adopt a boy. Doubts did not give her peace. Finally, she got up and left the room. "Helen," she turned to the nurse on duty. "Don't forget to bring the rejected boy to me for feeding. There's nothing for you to do." The girl wrinkled her nose. "Feed yours. You'll be leaving soon anyway, and he needs to get used to the bottle. But you still bring it." The woman asked insistently. The nurse shrugged and went back to her work. Susan stood for a moment longer, then returned to the room. She had fed the babies twice during the night, and each time her heart sank when the boy was taken from her arms. "We're discharging you tomorrow." The attending physician said, "The tests are good. There's no point in keeping you here any longer." Good. Samuel was happy when his wife told him. "Let's go home at last, Samuel." Susan looked at her husband questioningly. "You promised to think about the boy. Do you still insist?" "I don't insist. It has to be our mutual decision. I'll give it up if you say no, but before you say anything, think carefully. Maybe fate has put it in our hands. We're hardly going to get a second one, age and all, and here's a chance. Don't you have a heart? He'll be alone. He'll be placed in an orphanage. Then maybe he'll be adopted. We don't know where he'll end up, but he'll be fine with us. We love him like family." "Okay." Ruffling the hair on the back of his neck, Samuel said, "Suppose we take him, but how will you explain his appearance to our relatives?" "I've got it all figured out." Encouraged by Samuel's words, Susan hurried on. "We'll say I'm having twins, but how do you envision it?" The man clutched his head. "We told everyone we were expecting a girl." "So what?" "We can say that we just hid the presence of a second fetus. We wanted to make a surprise. But think about it. Who will find out the details?" "What about the parents?" Samuel doubted. "I think we should tell the parents the truth." "Well, Samuel, my beloved husband, what decision will we make?" "As you say, so it will be. I agree with your opinion." Ouch! He waved his hand. "Be what it will be. The boy needs a home, and we could use a second child." "Samuel!" Susan shrieked with joy so as not to wake her daughter and threw herself on her husband's neck. "I knew it. I knew you'd say yes. Do you know what paperwork the adoptive parents need to gather?" "I don't know, but I think our doctor can help with that." They left the room and went in search of a doctor. "Margaret?" The young men knocked at 6, entered the residence room. "We need to talk to you." "Go ahead." Samuel could see the question in her gaze and the shy hope in her eyes. "We're here about the abandoned boy." "What do you want to know?" "We're ready to adopt him." "Guys," Margaret splashed her hands, tears welling up in her eyes. "I'm so happy for you and for him. You're great. I'm sure this child will bring you happiness." "We came to find out what documents we need to prepare, and also to ask when we can take him home." "I'll tell you everything." The doctor hurried away. "Here you go." She took out a long list of documents from some folder. "We can't get it all together in a year." Samuel exclaimed, "I understand." The woman was embarrassed. "But that's the way it is. We can't just give the baby away." We have to make sure you're healthy, that he won't need anything. We were just about to go home. Susan was confused. What about the baby? You're not giving him to us now. I'm sorry. The doctor waved her hand sadly. We have to do all the paperwork first. What do we do? Susan looked at her husband in bewilderment. You'll have to stay with your mom for a while, Samuel said. We will calmly draw up the documents, here on the spot. Probably you can do it faster, and your return will look more natural. Don't worry, my love, he whispered in her ear. We'll make it work. What about your job? I think I can stay for a week. At least we'll have time to go through the doctors, and we'll figure out the rest. They said goodbye to the doctor and talked about where to start. Then Susan called her mother and told her she was coming. Daughter. Vanessa ran out onto the porch to greet her dear guests. Oh, I'm so glad. I never thought I'd see my granddaughter again. I thought you'd leave right away. Mom. Kissing her, the young woman said, We have something to talk to you about. Come in. Why are you stuck outside? Father is all exhausted, waiting for you. He can't wait to wash his feet with his son-in-law. When the joyful fuss had died down, the parents and guests gathered in the living room. Mom, Dad, Susan announced, we've decided to adopt. It's an informed decision. The daughter gestured to stop her father, who was about to be outraged. We've thought it over, but we don't want anyone but you and us to know that Hunter is a stranger to us by blood. Will you promise not to tell anyone? But my daughter, Vanessa tried to reason with the young parents. Are you sure you're doing the right thing? And how long will you hide from the baby that he is not your own? He must never know about it. Susan said firmly. The next day, the young people took the tests and went to the child welfare office. The head of the department read Samuel on a sign nailed to the door. Helen, hello. They hesitantly walked into the office, where an elderly woman sat behind a desk. She gave them a stern look at the threshold. Have you seen the appointment times for personal matters? We did. Samuel smiled disarmingly. But maybe you could make an exception for us. We want to adopt a boy. So, the woman asked in a displeased tone, looking at them over her glasses. Please leave my office and come back as scheduled. What kind of person are you? The man stormed out. We're talking about a child. We can't wait. Every day he spends in the hospital is like a day in jail for an adult. Don't make your own rules. I'm not going to change my work schedule because of you. This conversation is over. She's up. Please, Helen. Susan looked at her pleadingly. Help, and we will not be in your debt. The woman suddenly softened. All right, what child? Rejoicing at the sudden change in the department head's mood, Susan described the situation. Well, my darlings, the woman sat back in her seat. First, gather all the certificates. She put a list in front of them. No one will give you the baby without them. Isn't there any way to speed up the process? No way. The employee waved her hands. Maybe you are some kind of criminals, and you will do a hell of a lot with the child. Or had a criminal record. We must also look at the conditions in which you live, whether your income allows you to support the baby. Think about it. Samuel was getting more and more annoyed. Would we take a child if we didn't know what we could do? I don't know, it's not written on you. Helen was adamant. If you get the certificates, come back and we'll set a court date. What trial? Well, it's all through the court. The child didn't fall out of the sky into your hands. What if the relatives want to bring him up themselves? They've already written a waiver. That's the way it's supposed to be, and stop arguing, or I'll think you're mentally unstable. Samuel? Susan whispered pleadingly in her husband's ear. Don't argue with her, or they won't give Hunter back. Well, roughly asked the woman, settling back into the chair. "Why are you standing up? Go get the certificates. If you haven't changed your mind, I'm not going to collect them for you." Right away, they claimed to be in a hurry, but they froze like a statue. The young people left the office, shocked by the cold reception. "Old bitch," Samuel scolded. "There's nothing human left. If you want to do a good deed, you'll come across such bookish people, and you'll send the whole system to hell." "Darling, why are you so angry?" His wife tried to calm him down. "You can understand them too. They stand guard of the law. We are strangers. No one knows us here. No one to vouch for us. How many like us have passed through her hands? You'd think they'd look at the certificates and know us better." "Calm down, please. We'll get this paperwork together, and we'll all go home together. We have a lot of paperwork to put up with." 3 whole months went by without a hitch. Samuel and Susan were worried because the court hearing was tomorrow. The adoption case was being heard. The clerk announced. The judge read the application, familiarized herself with the certificates that the young family provided. "Why do you need this child?" she asked. "You have a daughter. Why do you need a stranger?" "Listen," Samuel spoke. "We couldn't have children for a long time, and we are unlikely to have a second one. We are not 18 years old. This boy is a gift from heaven. Can't you understand?" "Don't get excited." The judge stopped him. "Answer in substance. There is a certain order, and I ask you to follow it. We want to help the child." Susan answered firmly. "To find a family. We have the means. You've seen our documents. We have the will, and we have everything." Susan's eyes filled with tears. "I fell in love with him immediately because I had to feed him with my milk. I'm his milk mom, if you know what I mean." "I do." The judge looked at the young couple intently. "And if things don't work out, you can't take him back to the orphanage. It would be a tragedy for the baby." "No, it wouldn't. No one's going to give him up," Susan assured me fervently. "We already love him like his own and can't wait to take him home." The judge looked at Samuel, then looked at Susan and said, "I believe you for some reason. I hope I haven't misjudged you." The court recessed for deliberation. The clerk announced. A representative of the guardianship authorities followed the judge into the deliberation room. "All rise, the court is in session." The clerk again announced, "The application for adoption is granted," solemnly pronounced the judge. "Thank you." Susan whispered, fell back in her chair, and sobbed. "Why are you crying?" Smiling, Margaret asked her. "Everything is fine now. The boy will go with you." "Congratulations." She took Susan's crying hand and shook it reassuringly. "When can we pick up our son?" The new father asked. "We can't wait to introduce him to his new home. If within 10 days none of the relatives will make a claim, then the child can be taken away." The judge looked at him carefully and said respectfully, "And in general, you are, of course, good to take someone else's child for upbringing not everyone will dare. Usually they are abandoned and rarely taken into the family." "They are not good." Helen joined the conversation. "They have no idea what awaits them. We don't know what kind of heredity this boy has," she said glumly, as if they would not have to bite their elbows later and run to us and ask us to reverse the case. We've known such people, and then the children suffer all their lives, then in orphanages. "Why did you do that?" Margaret told her off. "Everything will be fine. You can see that people are responsible. They took this step consciously, and you can take the boy right now, without waiting for the 10 days to expire." The relatives, if they wanted to, have long ago announced themselves and claimed the rights to the child. So go home quietly, settle in, happiness for you and the children. She said a warm farewell to the parents of the babies. The next day, Susan and Samuel came to the maternity hospital and picked up the boy. Meet. Smiling happily, the woman announced as they entered her parents' home, "This is Hunter, your grandson." Her husband placed the bundle on the table, undressed the boy. He looked at the adults around him with both curiosity and fear. Then, unexpectedly, he roared in a bass voice, tapping his little hands and feet. The adults laughed. "Susan?" Vanessa asked her daughter when the passions had subsided and the children, washed and fed, slept in the crib. "What are we going to tell the relatives?" After all, everyone was expecting a girl, and then a boy came out of nowhere. How can you explain this phenomenon? It's a bit of a mystery, so I'll have to tell them. I'm afraid some people won't approve of your decision to adopt a boy. Mom, we've already thought of everything. No one from the relatives, except you, my parents and Samuel, must not know that Hunter is not our own. We have to try to forget that we adopted him like it never happened. After all, he's our son now. His real parents' names are only on the adoption certificate. How do you forget that? You can't lie your whole life. As the years go by, you'll realize they're not related. They don't look alike. We won't tell, but are you sure Samuel's parents won't tell anyone the secret of the boy's birth? I'm afraid that one day there will be trouble. When will that be? Susan dismissed it. For now, we're sticking to the legend that I gave birth to twins. Why couldn't it have been? I wonder, twins. The mother snorted incredulously. How did we get twins? And why didn't you say anything the whole pregnancy? I didn't say anything so that no one would envy our happiness or jinx it. If someone asks in whose family was twins, say on the husband, no one will not check. How can you hide something like that? Oh, daughter, this is not a good idea. And if someone finds out, can you imagine what a blow to the boy would be? If someone told him one day that he wasn't your kin, you can't hide anything from the neighbors. You won't even be able to visit without a care. That's why Susan reassured her. The only people who know about the adoption are you and us. The fewer people who know what we're doing, the better chance we have of keeping it a secret. No one in the village has ever seen me pregnant, so there will be no questions about where another baby came from, and we can visit you in peace. And if someone from the maternity hospital blabbed about it, you can't put a handkerchief on every mouth. Mommy, Susan hugged her mother. Even if some information leaks out, they'll forget it over time. And as for guests, you can come and stay as long as you like. You know you're always welcome. As the years went by, the children grew up, and their differences became more and more apparent. Listen, Susan. One day her cousin asked her, watching her nephews play on the playground, "Why is Hunter's hair so black and his eyes brown?" "I'm surprised. You and Samuel are both blonde, and Nancy is blonde, so who does he look like?" Samuel's parents have dark hair. Susan felt a chill inside. She didn't pay attention to little things like that. You saw them. Oh, who knows about genes? How am I supposed to know whose breed Hunter is? Personally, I don't care. Look how smart that boy is. But he and his sister look nothing alike. So what? Nancy's our breed and Hunter's his father's. It's still strange. The woman eyed the boy suspiciously. Are you sure you didn't have your baby switched at the hospital? I saw a program on TV the other day where several families suffered because of negligent nurses. Imagine, only to find out that the children were accidentally switched. Don't be ridiculous. Susan told her off. What are you doing with my kids? Have your own and put them under a microscope. It's like, it's not like. Even if it is, nature is so inexplicable. Doesn't it happen that babies don't look much like their parents? If I were you, I'd get a DNA test, see if they're really switched. Brother and sister can't be so different, but if you gave birth to them from Samuel, they are. She laughed. Are you out of your mind? How could that thought even enter your head? What should I think? The relative excused herself. I could be offended by such words. Come on. The woman poked Susan in the side conciliatingly. I was joking. Next time, doubts visited the kindergarten teacher. Susan? She asked with a laugh. I look at your babies and I can't understand how the same parents have such different children. Nancy is such a creative girl, singing, dancing, and how she tells poems. Hunter is completely different, silent, no creative skills, but he's already solving math problems. Susan remarked sharply, I don't get it. What are you implying? No, I'm not implying anything. The young teacher was frightened. I just can't understand why they don't even look alike. Because they're twins and twins can be different. In fact, leave my kids alone. Curiosity won't get you anywhere. Ask less questions. Do more with your kids. Susan said coldly, I'm sorry. The teacher was embarrassed. I didn't mean anything bad, but it's strange that they don't look alike at all, as if they came from different parents. Such conversations made Susan panic, and she tried to control herself and not get into an argument, proving that the man was wrong to question her children's parentage. Hunter and Nancy had been very friendly since childhood. If one of them was hurt, the other always came to the rescue. They were feared at school because the two of them could put any bully in his place, and yet sometimes there were situations that made their parents worry. Mom? Hunter asked one day, What's your blood type? B positive. And Dad? B positive. Why do you ask? What's mine? You? Susan hesitated and looked helplessly at her husband. Yes. Waiting, looking at the parents, the son asked. Today we talked about blood types in biology, and I don't know which one I have. You see, the woman was confused and then gathered herself and spoke cheerfully. In the maternity hospital, and children do not determine the blood type if the R factor is positive. That's why we don't know exactly what yours is. And what could be? Insisted son. Any type. If you have studied this topic in biology, you should know that in our case, children can have any blood type. How can I find out mine? You can get your blood analyzed and ask to have your blood type determined. Satisfied with his mother's answers, Hunter went about his business, while Susan poured herself a glass of water and drank it in one gulp. The older she gets, the more she asks questions that stump me. Thank goodness you found something to answer. My husband remarked, I'm afraid to guess what he'll ask next time. Time was running fast. The high school graduation came unexpectedly. Had we waited and our children would receive their diplomas today? Susan rejoiced, waiting for the celebration. I can't believe how fast the school years have gone by. I'm glad, Dad said, that they already know where they're going to go. They're wonderful children. Nancy will have a hard time. Mother smiled. The exact sciences were still unknown to her. Maybe she shouldn't have gone to an institute. A technical school was enough for a girl. Nothing. A good education has never hurt anyone. I'm glad that children help each other. Father remarked, Hunter won't leave her. You'll see she'll study for 2. The children went to university. Studying was not easy for the daughter at first, but Hunter studied with her sister in the evenings, and soon she began to make progress. Sister, do you know where we have all the documents? Hunter asked her once. I need my passport urgently, and I have no idea where to find it. Look in the cupboard. I think I've seen it there recently. Nancy responded, Why do you need one? I want to enroll in a driving course. They don't accept applications without a passport," answered his brother, digging through the papers. So, Hunter listed aloud the documents he found. Marriage certificate, Mom's birth certificate, Dad's birth certificate. "Nancy, your certificate is also here in mine, and here's the passport." He shook it triumphantly in the air. "And what's this?" Hunter frowned as he read it. An adoption certificate, and there was a tag from the maternity hospital with the date of his birth and his mother's name on it. "Why are you so quiet?" Nancy asked cheerfully, entering the room. "What's wrong with your face?" the girl asked, coming up close to her brother. "Have you found the secret materials?" She snatched the document out of his hands. "What are you reading?" "Letters from the past." Well, adoption certificate. I wonder whose?" "Hunter." The girl turned pale after reading the contents of the document. Her brother stood with his teeth clenched tightly. His cheekbones were jaundiced. He forcefully clenched his fingers into a fist so that the knuckles turned white. This is yours. What do you mean? You're not my own." "Adopted?" She looked at her brother confused. "It turns out that way." "Muffle," the young man answered. "And all this time you have lived with us as my own brother. Who are you then? Where are you from? And who are your parents?" "I don't know." Hunter looked at his sister confusedly. It was the first time he had seen this paper himself. "That's the news. It's quite a sensation. Where did you come from? And why didn't our parents ever tell us about it? Why did they hide it? I know as much as you do." Hunter was shocked by the sudden revelation of the truth about his birth. "I started to notice something was wrong with us a long time ago. Usually real brother and sister feel for each other, but I've never felt anything like that for you. I was always surprised, but now it's all falling into place. That's why you're nothing to me." Hunter stood looking at her as if seeing her for the first time. "Well, why aren't you saying anything?" Nancy was starting to get angry. "You always kept silent when there was trouble, and now you are silent. And I couldn't understand why your father and mother lick you so much. Hunter this, Hunter that, everything for Hunter. They felt obligated, and Hunter took advantage of that." "Nancy," Hunter said warningly, "let's be quiet now so that we don't say too much and regret it later. I don't like this whole situation either. This is my first time seeing this document just like you. I don't know when or why it all happened. At least, I don't remember. You might want to keep quiet for a while so I can think. I have yet to live with this. I'm in a worse position than you are, and you don't shut me up." The girl had already got into the role of a whistleblower and couldn't stop. Now a lot of things are explained. Like what? Why they bought you a brand new suit for the prom, and I had to wear my cousin's dress. You don't think I wanted a new dress? I was going to the International Math Olympiad. That's why they bought me one, not for graduation. Don't you remember? So you're so smart. You get the best, and I'm stupid. It'll do. Why are you talking nonsense? No one thinks you're stupid. Our parents always buy us both something. They don't neglect anyone. Why are you trying to insult them now? Remember, she went after my brother. We got bikes in 8th grade. They got Hugh a new high-speed bike, and they got me a hand-me-down simple one. So we got a Hunter again, and that's fine for Nancy. You say it never happened. I was already a good rider, and you were just learning. Why would you need a fast one? Your parents wanted you to start riding properly, and you have an explanation for everything. Nancy said with a sneer. And if you hadn't been there, it would have been all for me. My parents wouldn't have to split it between the two of us. Do you remember when we didn't go to the camp at the sea? Why didn't we? It was expensive to send 2 people. You'd be a drag everywhere. Tears spurted from Nancy's eyes. Childhood resentments that had been piling up for years came flooding out like a cornucopia. She pounded Hunter's chest painfully with her fist, then pounded on him. He struggled to turn away from the blows. It's all because of you, and you're a nobody, adopted and from who knows where. If it wasn't for you, Mommy and Daddy would only love me. You stole their love from me. Nancy, you don't know what you're saying. The young man, looking at his crying sister, was ready to cry too, but held himself back. He was unbearably hurt by his sister's words and even more hurt by the truth he had learned. I know, the girl screamed. I know. I've had to share my parents' attention with you all my life. They treated me like a silly little girl, but you're a math star. You're smart, strong, and I'm just an app. Even at school, you're a role model, and no one ever paid attention to me. You have your own talents. Hunter tried to calm her down. Why are you trying to insult me now? It's hard enough as it is. Believe me, I don't like this whole situation, and I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. Your parents always put you first, but in reality, you're nothing and your name is nothing. You're a stranger to us. Get out of our house. There's nothing here for you. Dad and Mom are mine, understand? And you go back to yours. Where are they? They abandoned you. They abandoned you, and they took pity on you. A poor orphan, a foundling. I hate you, I hate you. She rushed to her room, fell on her bed, and wept. At these words, which sounded like a slap in the face, Hunter turned pale. All right then, he said. If that's the way you want it, I'll leave. I'll find my real parents and forget about you. I don't want anything from you, so live as you wish. Go away. Tears were streaming down his face as his sister ran after him. No one will be sorry for you. Do you expect me to run and beg you to stay? I won't. He threw some things into his backpack, took his laptop, and carefully folded the adoption certificate and tag. At the door, he looked back, said a silent goodbye, and walked out of the house that had become a stranger to him in an instant. Nancy shuddered when the front door slammed, jumped out of bed. Somewhere inside remorse awoke, but the girl quickly wiped the tears and tried to calm down. Gone, she said. So be it. She was pleased with herself. The childish resentments that had accumulated in her heart had finally come out. I should have told him a long time ago, and that's what he should do. I never want to see him again in my life. And my parents? How could they do that? They didn't consult me, didn't ask me if I even wanted a brother. She closed her eyes, still sobbing, and fell asleep, tired, devastated. She awoke to the sound of her parents' voices in the kitchen. They were discussing something animatedly, chuckling. Nancy got up, went into the bathroom, washed her tear-swollen eyes, then wandered into the kitchen. Her mother was busy at the stove. Daughter, Susan asked cheerfully, noticing her. Call your brother. We'll have dinner. I'm hungry. I can't eat. I think I could swallow a mammoth right now. What's the matter with you? Your eyes are red. Have you been crying? She looked at her daughter worriedly. I'll get her. Samuel answered. He went into his son's room and shouted from there. He's not there. It's strange. Nancy? He asked his daughter, coming back. Do you know where your brother is? Did you two have a fight? The mother looked at the girl sternly. He is not my brother. Nancy replied glumly, sitting down at the table. What? The parents exclaimed with glee. Are you overheated in the sun? What do you hear? The girl replied swaggeringly, starting to eat. Don't pretend to be surprised. I know everything. He's nobody to me. Stand up when you talk to your parents. The mother turned pale and forced her daughter to rise from the table. What are you talking about? What happened between you two? Tell me now, why do you care about him so much? He's not your own son. Hunter found the adoption certificate. We talked to him for a while. She briefly recounted her conversation with Hunter. He left. I think he did the right thing. It's not his home, and you cheated me. I thought of him as my brother for 20 years, and he's a stranger who's been put into my family by someone else's grace, and you forgot to ask me if I wanted a brother. Are you out of your mind? Mother was furious. How could we ask you? You were just born then, both of you. Why didn't you tell us later? Why didn't we talk? Nancy insisted. Listen, daughter. Susan could hardly control herself. Maybe it's our fault for not talking to you sooner, and we certainly didn't expect it to come out so suddenly. But it's our decision, and it has nothing to do with you, much less Hunter. It's not his fault he was orphaned from birth. I didn't expect you, daughter, to throw a man out of his home. Tell me now, where could Hunter have gone? Father was out of his mind. If anything happens to him, I will never forgive you. How should I know? Nancy shrugged her shoulders irritably. He probably went to look for his real mother, and rightly so. There's nothing for foster children to do in our house. Let him go to hell. I won't cry. Susan, not expecting you herself, swung around and slapped her daughter. Mom, the girl grabbed her cheek. Tears came to her eyes from the pain. You hit me? Your own daughter hit me because of some prodigal. How can you do this to me? Do you love him more than me? Don't you dare call him that. Susan shouted in anger. You don't know anything. She fell back in her chair. You don't know anything. The woman cried. He has no one. His mother died in childbirth. There was no father, and his relatives refused. I fed him milk with you. I'm his milk mother, and he's not a stranger to us. I don't understand how you can be so callous. He's nobody to me. Nancy was stubborn. Maybe I'm a stranger to you, too. Rubbing her reddened cheek, she asked, You wouldn't beat a native, and all because of that Hunter. Well, kiss your favorite, of course. He's the best. You're wrong. Trying to pull himself together, my father said, If you think we love him more than you, we've never made any distinction between you. Remember, if we punished both of you, we praised you too. Remember how Hunter defended you if we were angry. He was willing to take punishment for you. Remember how he took the hit when a tree in the forest almost fell on you during a thunderstorm. He had his back to you. You little fool. You jealous little girl. You were at camp, don't you remember? He broke his arm then. He had to wear a cast for a month during the summer. Of course you forgot. Your empty head only remembers the wrongs, but not the good. I remember. Nancy's lips quivered. And you're still defending him now. I mean nothing to you. What are you talking about, silly? Her father put his arms around her, sat her down beside him on the couch, wiped away her tears. And remember, you were still small. Before Christmas we punished you and left you without sweets, and he gave you his present, and you sat under the table, eating candy, and thought we could not see anything. And after all that, you say he's not your own. How could you insult your brother? Yes, your parents are different, but sometimes strangers are much closer than family. If Hunter hadn't found that damn certificate, would it have occurred to you to question your parentage? You too couldn't be spilled with water. Mama, Papa. Nancy suddenly burst into tears. I'm such a fool. I've hurt Hunter. I'm selfish. He'll never forgive me. What have I done? He will. Susan took her daughter's hand. He will. We just have to find him first. Let's think together about where he might have gone. You know, the father asked. Which kids is he friends with the most? Classmates? Neighbors? You know his neighborhood better than we do. Think of names, phone numbers, places you've been. Yes. Now, wiping away her tears, Nancy started calling her friends. Hello, Ethan. Do you have Hunter? I can't get through. My parents are worried. If you have any, tell them to call me right away. She hung up. I haven't seen her. Call someone else. Susan interrupted her. Nancy dialed number after number, but each time she flailed her arms helplessly. No one had seen him. She roared again. What do we do? He'll come back, won't he? Mom, Dad, tell me, will he come back? Will we find him? There's nothing to do at home, Samuel said. I suggest we go to the yards. Dad got up, started to get dressed. Maybe he's sitting on a bench somewhere now, hesitating to go home, resentment getting in the way. He doesn't know that Nancy's head is back on straight. What a mess you've made of things, daughter. Father shook his head reproachfully. I know. Like a straw, the mother grasped at the suggestion. Let's go look for him, ask around, see if any of the neighbors have seen him. He couldn't have disappeared without a trace. They went to all the nearest yards, but Hunter seemed to have vanished into thin air. Okay, Samuel was determined. Now it's late. It's pointless to go through the yards. It's unlikely to spend the night on a bench. Probably hiding somewhere. Let's wait till morning. Maybe his son will show up. After all, he's a sensible man. And if he doesn't? Susan looked painfully at her husband. He had been wronged, and God only knows what was going on in his head. Nancy has told him so much. If he doesn't come back, we'll go to the police in the morning. It's useless to look for him ourselves. Let the professionals do it. They went home and went to their rooms. Mother woke up from every rustle. But Hunter did not appear, did not call, did not send a message. The night passed without sleep, waiting. It was our own fault, Susan said in the morning as she made breakfast. For some reason we left the documents in a prominent place. We should have destroyed them immediately. I asked you to. I've forgotten all about them. My father lamented. I never thought that someone would need to go through old papers. Well, now it's too late to sprinkle ashes on your head. Let's have breakfast and go to the police. What about me? Nancy asked, wrapped in a blanket and squinting her sleepy eyes. You stay home and wait for your brother. Keep your cell phone on you, and if he shows up, call him right away. You got it? Okay. Parents, I'm sorry. She said it guiltily. We're not the ones you need to apologize to. Susan and Samuel drove to the police station, her father driving silently, staring at the road. Nothing bad should happen to him, right? Susan asked suddenly. Of course not. He's an adult. He always weighs his every move. He thinks straight. He'll get by. They drove up to the police station. Our son is missing. The mother said, We've got a missing son. We want to file a report. How old is the child? Asked the officer on duty, without taking his head from filling out the log. 20. You what? The policeman immediately took his eyes off his notes. Are you kidding me? I don't understand you. Susan was taken aback by this strange reaction. The boy is an adult. The policeman grinned. Couldn't he go out with his friends or stay at a girl's house? Why are you panicking? We've got enough work to do without your great young man. Wait, he'll be back tonight. Maybe you shouldn't be so quick to file a report. Are you refusing to accept our application? Susan looked at him suspiciously. No. The desk clerk was embarrassed. Of course you write it, we'll take it. But what if you come back now and your son is already at home sleeping after a stormy night? What are you saying? The worried mother was indignant. Hunter would never do such a thing in his life. He doesn't drink at all and always warns me if he's going to be late. But this time he didn't. The young man remarked reasonably, "He didn't." Susan agreed, "But this is a special case. Please help us bring our son home. We've hurt him very much. He's proud. He'll never come back on his own. Don't worry, we'll find your boy." The officer on duty reread the statement, attached a photo. "Stay at home. If he shows up on his own, let us know at once to call off the search." Parents rushed home. "I wish I could." Susan spoke without blinking, staring at the road. "I wish the children were home now." "I wish that too." Samuel responded, "We should think about where he could go." They went up to the apartment and opened the door, hoping to see their son. "Didn't show up?" the mother asked from the doorstep. Nancy shook her head negatively. "Hunter's son." Susan went into the living room and sat down on the couch without undressing. "Where are you?" "Mom?" The daughter came to her mother, hugged her. "Don't get upset. We'll get him off, you'll see." They sat together in the living room and waited for some news, but the phones were silent. Meanwhile, Hunter arrived at the bus station. "Hello. I need a ticket to." He glanced at the tag and named the city. The woman behind the window looked at him curiously, asked for his passport, punched the receipt, and handed him the ticket. "The bus is in 50 minutes, she informed him. The young man went into the station cafeteria, drank coffee, ate a couple of rolls, and wandered around the neighborhood. When he heard the boarding announcement, he got on the bus. Why? He thought to the peaceful whirring of the engine. Did my parents hide from me that I was not their own son? Why did they adopt me? And what will I say to my mother when I see her, and will I even be able to find her? What is she like? Maybe I should go back." Suddenly he thought, "No." He said firmly to himself, "I'm not going back. After what Nancy told me, I'll never go back. Turns out I didn't know her at all. How much resentment did she hold in her?" He sighed sorrowfully. Soon fatigue and worry took their toll, and in a few minutes Hunter dozed off, sitting comfortably in his chair. "Hey, boy!" Hunter woke up to someone shaking him by the shoulder. "Wake up, end of the line. The bus isn't going any farther. Get off, come on." "Ah!" The young man had barely recovered from his nap. "Sorry, I'm getting off." He rubbed his face, finally throwing off the remnants of sleep, picked up his backpack, bag with laptop, and got off the bus. He looked back and walked down the street. "Excuse me." He stopped a woman passing by. "I'm looking for this man." He said his mother's name. "Do you happen to know where she lives? Camille?" "I do. Of course I do." She grinned, looking at the boy with interest. "Everyone here knows her. Can you tell me how I can find her? And who are you?" "Never mind. Just tell me where to find her." "Go down this street. After 2 houses, turn right and go to the end. There's your Camille." "Thank you." Hunter hurried toward the house where he thought his mother lived. "Hey, boy!" The woman called out to him. "I'd think twice before making an acquaintance with someone like that if I were you." Hunter didn't answer anything, but walked to the given address. He was nervous for the upcoming meeting. The street was lined with well-built houses, and Hunter looked at them curiously. But the closer he got to the outskirts of the village, the slower his step became. The rich, well-kept houses were replaced by old, ramshackle huts, and Hunter stopped in front of one of them. Did someone really live here? The young man could not believe his eyes. A shriveled house among the tall and long ago not mown grass. The sun was reflected in the dirty, blinded windows. On a shabby plaque, nailed to the corner of the house, one could hardly see the number of the house. There was no doubt that this was the house he was looking for. Hunter opened the gate. With a horse barking, a chained dog jumped out of the booth. A neatly dressed, unshaven man came out. "What do you want?" "I'm looking for a stranger." Squinting into the sun, the man said, keeping his cigarette in his mouth. "I'm looking for Camille Clark. I was told she lives here." "Well, she does. But what do you want from her?" "She's my mom," Hunter said with one lip. The man dropped the cigarette from his mouth in surprise. "Camille, come here. Your son is looking for you." A couple of minutes later, a short woman came out on the porch. She was dressed in a stretched sweater, which was constantly coming off her shoulders, exposing a white t-shirt that had once been washed, a soiled robe sticking out from under the sweater, which reached her knees, worn barefoot. Trampled slippers completed the picture. She, fixing her dirty, disheveled hair, looked at the stranger attentively and spoke in a faltering tongue. "What are you doing, Bob? Have you eaten too much bleach?" "What son?" "I don't have one." She immediately shrieked in bed, having received a sensitive blow to the side from her roommate. "Come on in, boy." Hunter, the man, smiled broadly. "Your mother's sick. She's not thinking straight. And it's been a while. How old are you?" 20, replied Hunter, walking into the house. "She's been looking forward to seeing you, hasn't she, Camille?" He squeezed his friend's elbow warningly. Yes, agreed the woman, looking at her partner perplexed. "Come and sit down, and we'll set the table with your mother." Bob dragged Camille into the kitchen. "You almost ruined everything," he hissed at her. "Can't you see that? The kid's well dressed, so he must be from a rich family." "Well, he's not my son. I've never had kids." "Who cares now, stupid? If you're his mother's full namesake, we can capitalize on that resemblance. You know what I mean, dummy head." "But how?" "First of all, make up a sob story about why you had to give him up. We need to do everything we can to keep him here." "Why?" "We don't have enough to eat, and we've got an extra mouth to feed. He's a big boy. He needs to be fed." "What a fool you are. He's gonna feed us, so he can help his mommy a little. Now pretend to be a loving and suffering mother, a victim of human injustice. Go to him and pretend you've dreamed all your life of finding him." Hunter gingerly sat down on the worn sofa and looked around the room. "How can anyone live here?" he thought. "Why is it so dirty? It's like our place." He thought involuntarily, and then he stopped himself. "There's no us. I'm on my own." "What's your name, child?" Camille appeared in the room. "Hunter." The young man went up to meet her. "Wow." The woman brushed away a tear. "I dreamed of naming my son Hunter, too. Apparently, God heard me and suggested this name to your foster parents." She walked over to the young man and took him into her arms. "Son, how happy am I to see you." She pulled away from him, scrutinizing him. "Tall, handsome, just the way I imagined you in my dreams. You have no idea how much I suffered for leaving you at the maternity hospital." "But why?" Hunter looked at her intently. "Why did you leave me?" "Let's sit down. There is no truth in your feet." She sank down on the sofa beside her guest, folding her hands mournfully in her lap. "I would never have given you up if it weren't for circumstances, son," she sobbed. "I had no money to support you. Who was I? A young girl with no education, no steady job. Your father, when he found out I was pregnant, abandoned me. My parents conditioned me to leave the baby at the hospital or get the hell out. What could I do? I was almost as old as you are now. I'm sorry, son." She took his hands in hers and clung to them, hot tears streaming down her cheeks. Hunter felt them dripping down his arms. I'm very guilty before you. I'll never begrudge you forgiveness. Oh, come on, you. I understand different circumstances happen. I'm not angry with you. But now that you've found me, we'll never part again, will we? She looked hopefully at the young man. Yes, I'll stay with you, if I may. The woman hugged the boy. He wrinkled his nose, smelling the strong odor of booze and unwashed female body. He wistfully remembered the smell of his foster mother, always well-groomed, clean, and trim. Thank you, dear, for not giving up on me, for finding me. Now I'm not afraid to die, my blood. Dying? Why do you say that? I'm very sick. Camille sighed heavily. What about you? Is there anything I can do to help? You see, there's no work here. We get by on odd jobs, and my health isn't what it used to be, and I'm old. The employer wants someone younger. We don't even have anything to buy you. So let me go to the store now, suggested Hunter, rising to his feet. I have money. My darling son. Camille hugged the boy again. Thank you. We must celebrate your arrival. Bob? She called her roommate, who had been in the kitchen all this time. Take the boy to the store. Tell him what to buy for the table. By the time the men returned from the store, the woman had put the room in relative order. A mountain of unwashed dishes disappeared from the kitchen. The floor was washed. An old but clean bedspread appeared on the sofa. The table was shot with oilcloth. Here we are, Bob announced happily, putting 2 full bags of sundries on the table. Generous son of yours. Come on, mother, set the table. We'll celebrate his return to you. I've invited some friends of ours. Quietly, he said in the woman's ear. Is there a place to wash? Hunter asked hesitantly. I'm sweaty and dusty from the road. Bob laughed. We have a bathhouse, but we ran out of firewood last month, and we have no money to buy it. Tomorrow we'll agree with the neighbors. They'll heat the bathhouse. You'll wash yourself, and if you want, you can wash yourself with cold water, straight from the well. I'll bring a towel right away. Hunter, shivering from the cold, doused himself with water from the well, changed into a fresh t-shirt, and returned to the house. Sit down, son. Invited his mother. Don't be sorry what God has sent. We serve. Hunter sat at the table, listened to the conversations of adults, and saw how his mother's mood gradually improved, warmed by vodka. I see that you have fallen into a good family. She started talking. Lucky then. Don't look at me like this. I used to be beautiful, not drinking. I had a hard life. She cried. But when you drink, you feel better. And how I longed for you, she said, thinking all the time how my son was doing. And my son lived a good life. And now I'm like this, sick through and through. No job, no health. If it hadn't been for Bob, she'd have waved her hand and drunkenly hiccuped. I'd have died a long time ago. I can't work, and I need money for medicine, you know. If you could live with your mom for a while, Bob suggested. You could work, support her. We could get her health back on track. All right, I can stay late. I'm on my university vacation right now. While they were talking, the guests arrived. Here are our friends. Welcome to the new arrivals, Bob. This is Camille's son, here to visit. The man and woman said hello to Hunter, sat down at the table, and the conversation was immediately revitalized. See. Looking proudly at Hunter, Camille boasted, What a handsome son I have grown up. I wasn't so bad when I was his age, but now. She cried, knocked back a shot of vodka. Alone, nobody needs me. All hope for my son. You don't know. The young man looked around at the already pretty tipsy company. Where can I get a temporary job here? If only at the market, as a loader. Answered the guest. There is always a shortage of people there. I agree. When do I start? Come tomorrow, I'll set you up with the market owner. But the work is hard. He hummed, incredulous, looking at the puny boy. Can you do it? I can handle it. Shall I lie down? Hunter asked his mother, not boldly. He didn't call her by her name and patronymic. It was awkward, and he couldn't pronounce the word mom. Oh, what am I, dummy head? Camille got excited. Come on, I'll make you a bed. You're tired from the road. She took the young man to the farthest room, where there was nothing else but an old rickety wooden bed and a couple of chairs. The woman made up the bed and left Hunter alone. It took him a long time to fall asleep, reliving over and over the events of the day. Drunken voices came from the kitchen. Then one of the men picked up a guitar, and everyone sang. The young man covered his head so he wouldn't hear the noise and soon fell asleep. Hunter? The boy woke up to the hoarse voice of the woman he thought was his mother. It's time for you to go to work, Bob. Hurry up so you can have breakfast. Hunter quickly washed his face, ate the remains of last night's feast, and went with the man to get a job. Here's your job. A sturdy man in his old age pointed at the crates of fruit. Now the car will come. The forwarder will say what you need to load. The salary will depend on your The young man worked all day, taking only small breaks. His master praised him. Well done. I'm pleased with you, he said to the boy in the evening, counting out the bills. Here, you've earned it. Only Hunter went outside from the market gate when Bob ran up to him. Hi, sniffing his nose and occasionally looking around, said the man. So, how was your first day? Fine, Hunter replied. I'm a little tired. Now it would be good to have a snack, because I haven't eaten anything since morning. Yeah. Put your arm around his shoulders and said Bob. I'll be right there. Mom's setting the table. Just then, he looked away again. Let's go to the store. It's supposed to be paid from the first paycheck, he assured, noticing the young man's perplexed look. And your mom's head hurts after yesterday. It needs to be fixed. Do you understand? You're a caring son, aren't you? You and I are going to go to the store. The man insistently pulled Hunter toward the store. We'll buy what we need, and then we'll go home. At home, the company from yesterday was waiting for them. Oh, they greeted Hunter with shouts of joy. Our breadwinner is here. The first paycheck should be properly celebrated, Bob announced, putting a bag full of vodka and snacks on the table. Well? Impatiently asked his mother. Show me how much you've earned. She looked greedily at the bills that the young man took out of his jacket pocket. You'll share it with your mother, right? Sure. The boy handed her almost all the money, leaving a small amount for himself. Here, thanks, of course, why you need money and me, she wept. I just need to buy some medicine. And again the house was noisy until midnight, until the hosts and guests fell asleep wherever they could, exhausted from drinking and eating. The next day, everything was repeated. Hunter was silent, did not make a remark to his mother, did not try to chase the guests away. He went to work every day, and the company successfully drank and ate his earnings. The young man lost count of the days. More and more often, he was overtaken by memories of that family, but he chased the thoughts away from himself, not allowing himself to regret for a moment the decision to leave home. Hunter, son, his mother called out to him one evening. He had just fallen into a peaceful sleep, giving rest to his body, tired from physical work. Get up. Some people are asking for you. What people? Reluctantly wiping his sleepy eyes and getting out from under the warm blanket, Hunter asked, Do I know? Go see for yourself. Camille took a firm step toward the hallway. Why are you here? Hunter asked rudely, seeing his foster parents in the hallway. Hunter. Susan's lips quivered when she saw her son, gaunt, in a laundered t-shirt, with long unwashed hair, barefoot. He was a pitiful sight. We need to talk. Why don't we go outside? Let's talk quietly, without witnesses. Son? Camille came out of the kitchen. Are you all right? Who are these people? What do they want from you? I'm fine, answered the young man and went out of the door and into the street. You came for nothing, he said firmly. I'll stay here. At least until classes start at the university. Son. Susan looked at him pleadingly. I'm not your son. He cut her off abruptly. You tricked me. Hunter, you're wrong. The father walked over to his son and took him by the shoulders. Look me in the eye. We had no intention of deceiving you. We just didn't find the right time to tell you everything, but we're not guilty of anything. There's nothing more to tell. Don't worry about it. I found my real mom, and I'm gonna stay with her and take care of her. You don't like the way she is. What can you do? You can't choose your parents. She needs me. It's my duty to stay by her side. Hunter. Stammering, Susan said in horror, Hey, boy. Bob came out on the porch, already pretty drunk. You need help. Are they trying to take you away? Don't give in. You get the hell out of our house. This is private property. Hunter. The woman closed her eyes for a moment to endure the drunken man's lunge. You're wrong to think this woman is your mother. Your mother died as soon as you were born. I know that for a fact. And if by blood I'm not really your mother, then you could call me a milk mother. I'm the one who breastfed you, and she's an imposter. No way. The young man turned cold, but everything coincided, even the village. She is just a full namesake of your mother, took advantage of the situation, fooled your head, convinced you that you are her son. We asked the neighbors. She's a long-time deep drinker. Your mom was a very nice woman. You're just like her. What does that make it? Hunter asked, shifting his gaze from Susan to Samuel. Were they using me? Unfortunately, it turns out that they did. But why? Son. Camille's head came out of the door again. We're waiting for you, darling. Is that true? The young man was at the woman's side in 2 leaps. Is what true? I don't understand. What are you talking about now? Camille was stunned. Is it true that you're not my mom? Did they tell you that? She nodded at the foster parents. You won't be able to lean on them. Susan remarked, I knew his mother. And if I did? Camille arched her back and looked at Susan with contempt. That I don't have the right to live like a white man for a while. She sobbed. I want someone to take care of me too. At least someone, but Hunter. She patted the young man's cheek. He recoiled sharply from her. He did it so touchingly. I loved being in the role of his mom. I am a very lonely person and need simple motherly happiness. Am I to be despised for that? Well, have you deceived me? Hunter boiled. Just a little bit. Bob made it all up? Yes. And I felt like a mother this month because I have no one. Tears showed in his drunken eyes. We lived almost like a real family. That's mean. What do you know about mean? She swayed. Hunter supported her. I'm a miserable person, and even this month I loved you in my own way. You're a manipulator. Through Hunter. How could you take such a sneaky advantage of my trust? My goodness, how gentle we are. Camille snorted. Hunter, shall we go home? Susan looked at her son pleadingly. Why do you need me? You have your own daughter, and you don't need me. I'm just a nuisance. That's right. Camille clapped her hands. Don't go with them. Stay with us. You're a stranger to them anyway. So what difference does it make where you live? We have fun here. Don't listen to her, son. Susan didn't know what other arguments to make to convince him to go with them. You've always been and will always be family to us. Daddy and I love you very much, and I love you very much too. Finally confessed the young man. Forgive me, I thought I was an extra in the family. Thank you for everything. If it weren't for you, I don't know what would have happened to me. I'm ashamed that I ran away from home without listening to you. Susan opened her arms. Hunter rushed to his mother. We've been worried sick about you. Nancy's been worried sick about you. Kissing and hugging her son, the woman said. Samuel hugged them, and the three of them stood there until Susan realized what was going on. What are we waiting for? Pack up, son. Let's go home. We don't have to stay here. Hunter quickly packed his things and got into the car. Hey, boy, Bob shouted after him. If you decide to run away from home again, know that you're welcome here. It was good to have all the misunderstandings behind him. Susan said, holding her son close to her, We are together again. Nancy ran out into the hallway as soon as the front door slammed. Hunter. She threw her arms around her brother's neck. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me the other day. I take it all back. You can hit me, but I'm sorry. Okay, forget it. Hugging her, the young man said, No, you say you forgive me. I really miss you, I really do. I'm insanely ashamed of what I said. You are the best brother ever. I really wanted you to come back. Tell me you've forgiven me. I won't let you go until you do. I'm not angry with you. Hunter replied with restraint. Forget everything I said to you. I'm very happy to have such a brother. I don't know what bug bit me then. Nancy held her brother's hands and looked guiltily into his eyes. I've been so bad without you. There hasn't been a day this whole month that I haven't thought about you, scolded myself for my long tongue. And I missed you too, my parents. I'm disgusted at how I've lived all this time. I can't believe it's only been a month. It feels like a year. Guys, their parents hugged each other and looked at them with emotion. How great it is that we are all together again. Let's not remember the bad things. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Strange, who could it be? Opening the door, Samuel asked. I hope it's not your so-called mom chasing after you. Everyone laughed, waiting to see who they would see when the door opened. Good afternoon. A stubby, middle-aged man in a dark suit stood on the doorstep. I'm looking for Hunter. He gave the young man's full name. It's me. Hunter answered confused. And who are you? I don't know you. My name is William. I'm a notary and a trustee of your grandfather, Christian. What grandfather? There must be some mistake. Hunter looked back at his parents in confusion. I don't have a grandfather by that name. Dear William, Hunter was stopped by his mother. Let's go into the living room. Well, are we keeping the man in the hallway? Everyone followed Susan into the room. William? The woman spoke again. You said Hunter had a grandfather. Is that correct? No mistake. Christian, Hunter's paternal grandfather. He asked me to look for his grandson, which I did. I was also instructed to inform you. He addressed Hunter. That the will gives you a 2-room apartment in the elite district of the city, I think it's a sin to refuse such an inheritance. Yes, this is the first I've heard of this grandfather. And yet, the man was persistent. It's true. He lived alone for years, looking for you everywhere. It was only just before he died that he managed to track down his own grandson. Unfortunately, circumstances prevented him from doing so earlier. The search took too long. The boy grinned. And where is the grandfather himself? It would be nice to have a look at him and make sure it's not a joke, because I've already found one false mother. I don't want to be disappointed again. You won't be able to do that because Christian died recently before the most important moment in his life, meeting his grandson. Believe me, he would have tracked you down long ago, even hired a private detective for this purpose, but there was too little information about you and your mother. He didn't immediately recognize that he had a grandchild. Moreover, even in the maternity hospital, your traces were lost, and then all sorts of bureaucratic obstacles prevented a quick search for you. Sad, of course, coldly remarked the young man, but I don't need anything from a complete stranger. I have people whom I consider my family, and him I have never seen in my life. Let it all stay that way. I do not need anything from him. Son, his mother stopped him. Listen to the man, please. We don't know why your grandfather didn't have a chance to contact you before. Surely there must be a reasonable explanation for this. Don't mind him, Mr. Notary. He's a little upset. We are ready to listen to you further. I have come to fulfill Christian's last will and testament. The man looked at Susan with gratitude for the support, and to give you a letter from him. He held out a sealed envelope to Hunter. I'm glad that, at least now, my client's soul is at rest, and this is the address where you must come to inherit the estate. Do not delay with it. In 6 months we will formalize your inheritance, but already now you can use the apartment. So I'll be expecting you soon. The keys to the apartment are kept with me. And now let me digress. He bowed his head ceremoniously and left, leaving the whole family at a loss. What are you frozen? Nancy came out of her reverie for the first time. Hurry up and get to the table. I've made a lot of food waiting for you. Let's celebrate Hunter's return. Leave the serious stuff for tomorrow. Really? Mother's cheerful. It's been so long since we've been together. So much has happened lately. It's been overwhelming. Hunter? The father put his hand on his son's shoulder. Maybe you should be alone. Read your letter. We'll understand. We won't take offense. No. The young man shook his head, as if shaking off heavy thoughts. I'll read it later. I want to try Nancy's food first. I hope she's not planning to poison me. Oh, you! The girl took a joking swing at her brother. I tried my best, and you're laughing at me again. At last we can hear our son again, smiled the father. Children don't be naughty, as their mothers stop them as children. Indeed, it's time to go to the table. I have much to tell you, said Hunter, when the first cheer of his return had passed. That's good. Susan rejoiced. I want to hear how you've been living all this time, how you came across this same false mom. If you could see, she turned to her daughter. What a shack your brother had to live in. I am deeply ashamed. Nancy was blushing to the roots of her hair. That I attacked you, Hunter. When I realized what I'd done, I was ready to fall through the ground. I really wanted you back. I mean, we've got the whole place on edge. Right, parents? We even got the police involved. Without them, we never would have known where to find you. Don't apologize. The young man smiled. I'm also good. Instead of waiting for you, Dad, Mom, and talk, I ran away from home, got angry like a girl, and I'm a grown man, could not curb emotions. It's unforgivable in me. He waved his hand guiltily. The most important thing is that we are together again. Susan looked fondly at the children, her husband. It was good that everything ended safely. Everyone had learned a life lesson. Now everyone knew everything. There should be no hard feelings. They sat up past midnight, talking, laughing, remembering stories from their childhood. We're sitting up too late, Mother realized. It's time, agreed Father. I'm tired from the road. Soon everyone went to their rooms, and Hunter was alone. He went to the window and stood looking at the distant, dark sky for a long time. Finally, he resolutely grabbed the envelope, opened it, and began to read. "Dear grandson," Christian wrote, "if you are reading this letter, it means that I am no longer alive, and I will never be able to see you. I won't recognize you as you have become. I won't be able to look you openly in the eyes, to justify myself to you for your son, your father, and for myself, to ask for forgiveness. I won't be able to tell you that I've thought of you every minute. Yes, grandson, my heart is full of unspent love and tenderness. How I long to hold you against my chest, to tell you that I persisted in searching and hoping to meet you for all 20 years. Believe me, I would have given everything just to see you, at least once, and then I would not be afraid to accept death. Where were you, grandfather?" Hunter swallowed the lump stuck in his throat. Then the news that I was living in a foster home wouldn't have been so shocking to me. I wouldn't have developed a persistent sense of loneliness. He took a deep breath, regaining his composure, and continued reading again. "I'm sure you would have understood me, but I guess it was God's will to punish me severely for failing to raise my son properly. He left your mother when he found out she was pregnant. He ran away like a coward, afraid of responsibility, and when he admitted that your mother had a son by him, I immediately rushed to look for her. But it was too late. She died in childbirth, and you were immediately adopted. Nobody wanted to tell me the last name of these people, covering themselves with the secrecy of adoption. I had to stop looking because my son fell into bad company and needed constant supervision. I did not teach him responsibility, did not instill in him an aversion to bad habits, did not immediately realize that except for himself, he loves no one else. He got addicted to drugs and burned out in a couple years. My wife, your grandmother, couldn't bear the grief and left after her son. I was ready to go after them, but the thought of you kept me going. Can't you imagine, grandson, what torture it was? To be alone with bitter guilt. If my son hadn't left Camille, she'd still be alive. I hired a private detective, but he didn't get on your trail right away. The golden time was irretrievably lost. Unfortunately, worries over the death of my wife and son, despair at not being able to find you, undermined my health. I know that I don't have long to live. That's why I'm writing this letter, to have time to say everything I wanted to say. Now that you know the truth about our family, maybe you will find a drop of sympathy in your heart, and someday you will forgive all of us for making you suffer. I pray to God that you will find in your new family the happiness that my foolish son has deprived you of. To help you in any way I can, I'm leaving you a small inheritance. My notary will take care of the arrangements. I hope you won't refuse to accept this gift. That's it, dear grandson. My heart acts for you every day. Farewell without a trace. I believe you will be happier than we are." Hunter tore himself away from the letter. For a long time he sat staring at one point, then he crumpled up the sheet of paper, threw himself on the bed, and cried. He heard the door creak. He was inexpressibly ashamed of his weakness, but he could not stop. Tears were pouring from his eyes. Sonny! Susan crouched down beside him on the bed, stroked his head. "I'm so sorry you didn't get to meet your grandfather, but if he sent this letter, he loved you." Gradually the sobs dampened. Hunter, wiping his tears, sat down next to his mother. There was no one left of them. Still sobbing, he said, "They're all dead, you see. I'm the only one left." The door to the room creaked open again, and Nancy appeared. "You are not alone, for you have us," she said. "And we love you very much." She hugged her brother, tears welling up in her eyes from the tenderness overflowing her soul. "I know." Hunter smiled. "I love you all very much, too." Her daughter was followed into the room by her father. "But are you going to shed tears here? Hunter, it turns out, is a very desirable groom." He smiled. "Now that you have your own apartment, I hope you don't want to move out immediately. We wouldn't like that very much. All three of them looked at the boy expectantly. No. Hunter smiled, looking at them warmly. You are my closest people, my real family, and I don't need another.